he made his way to the small, precise meditation chamber. A solitary moonbeam, piercing the paper window, dusted the woven mat with silver. Settling, legs crossed and spine erect, he centered himself. Breath became his anchor, a measured tide, drawing away the strategic calculations and anxieties that perpetually churned within. Clarity, not enlightenment, was his quarry. A placid lake mirrors the heavens, a roiling one distorts. He quelled the inner storm. Observation, not reaction, comprehension, not judgment. Today demanded delicate parleys, a tightrope walk above a chasm, and required the precision only a tranquil mind could afford. He envisioned the faces awaiting him, the grasping lord of Wei, ever hungry for more land, the pragmatic envoy from Qi, seeking only the preservation of a precarious peace, the impetuous general of Chu, his ego outweighing his good sense. Each a player, masked in hidden agendas and fabricated truths. Sun Izu pierced their facades. He perceived the fear fueling their ambition, the insecurity goading their pride, the avarice clouding their judgment. He recognized their vulnerabilities, and he would use them, not for selfish ends, but to steer them towards a mutually beneficial path, averting the devastation of war. The rising sun painted the heavens in shades of peach and rose as he meditated for an hour. A serene confidence settled within him, the quiet assurance that he could navigate the treacherous currents of the day. Leaving the mat, he stepped into the small washroom. A splash of cold water, a welcome shock, sharpened his senses. He donned simple, unadorned robes of indigo, the color of the pre-dawn winter sky. Simplicity was his preference. It was a clever guise. He found Lady May in the kitchen, already preparing their morning repast. The comforting scent of steamed rice and ginger filled the cozy space, a fragrance redolent of home. She turned as he entered, smile lines deepening around her eyes. "Good morning, husband," she greeted, her voice a gentle melody. "Did meditation grant you serenity?" "It granted clarity," Sun Izu replied, taking his seat at the plain wooden table. "Clarity I will need today." Lady May placed a bowl of steaming rice and a small dish of pickled vegetables before him. "The Lord of Wei again?" she inquired, a hint of gentle disapproval coloring her tone. Sun Izu affirmed with a nod. "And emissaries from Qi and Chu. They circle each other like cautious predators, each probing for weakness." Lady May sat across from him, filling a cup with jade green tea. "And you, my astute strategist, must prevent them from drawing blood. I must guide them to understand that cooperation yields greater rewards than conflict," Sun Izu said, sipping his tea. "A difficult task, given their proclivities." Lady May offered a soft chuckle. "Indeed. Men are so easily swayed by vanity and greed. They often mistake bluster for strength. And humility for ignorance," Sun Izu added. "A perilous miscalculation." They ate in comfortable silence, punctuated only by the soft click of their chopsticks against the ceramic bowls. It was a silence born of deep connection, a shared understanding that obviated the need for constant chatter. "What approach will you take today?" Lady May asked, breaking the quiet. He pondered her query, valuing her insight, her ability to distill complex human interactions into their essence. "I will offer them a glimpse of a future," he finally stated. "A future where all three flourish, not through conquest, but through commerce and alliance. A future where their people are secure, and their lands prosperous." "A noble vision," Lady May said, nodding. "But will they embrace it? Will they see past their own narrow interests?" "That is the crux of the matter," Sun Izu acknowledged. "I must instill that belief. I must demonstrate that peace aligns with their self-preservation." "Subterfuge, then?" Lady May asked, her gaze searching his. Sun Izu hesitated. "Not subterfuge, per se," he clarified. "Persuasion. Nudging them towards a truth that already exists, yet obscured by their biases. Not about fabrication, but revelation. And should they reject this truth?" Lady May pressed. "Then I must employ alternative means," Sun Izu said, his tone hardening. "Means that will encourage a shift in perspective." Lady May sighed softly. "The cost of peace," she murmured. "It often bears a heavy price." "Indeed," Sun Izu said, his gaze meeting hers. "But it is a price that must be rendered. The alternative is catastrophic." They concluded their meal in silence, the looming day pressing upon them. As Sun Izu rose, Lady May touched his arm. "Be careful, husband," she urged, her voice laced with worry. These are men devoid of scruples. They will exploit every advantage. I am cognizant of their potential, Sun Izu said, gently squeezing her hand. And I will anticipate their machinations. He retired to his study, a modest chamber lined with scrolls and writing tools. He sat at his desk, the wood polished smooth by countless hours of use. He lifted his stylus, a slender bamboo rod tipped with delicate bristles. He scrutinized the tip, noting the minute splay of the fibers. Reaching for a whetstone, he began to hone the stylus, his motions deliberate and unhurried. The rhythmic rasp of stone on bamboo filled the chamber, a soothing cadence that calmed his mind. He sharpened the stylus until it possessed a needle-like precision. Precision was paramount today, not only in articulation but in thought itself. A dull tool would be useless. He needed to slice through layers of artifice, to unearth the buried truth. He reflected on his writings, the scrolls destined to be known as the art of war. He wrote not of triumph or domination, but of strategy and misdirection, of the necessity of knowing both adversary and self. He wrote of the paramount importance of avoiding conflict, of achieving success without bloodshed. Yet, he also wrote of the imperative of preparedness, of the necessity of decisiveness when conflict became inevitable. He knew that enduring peace could only be built upon strength, and that strength often necessitated the use of deception as a weapon. He finished sharpening the stylus and dipped it into the inkwell. He began to write, the brushstrokes flowing fluidly across the bamboo scroll. He wrote of the vital role of terrain, of understanding the strengths and vulnerabilities of the land. He wrote of the need to carefully select engagements, to strike at an opponent's weaknesses while avoiding their strengths. He wrote of the power of illusion, of creating misleading impressions and diverting your opponent. He wrote of achieving victory by subtle means and of winning battles before they are even joined. As he wrote, a sense of purpose washed over him. He was more than a strategist or a negotiator, he was a mentor, a philosopher. He sought to impart wisdom, not only to the rulers and commanders of his era but to generations yet to come. He sought to teach the path to avoiding war, to achieving peace through comprehension and strategic thought. A glance out the window revealed the sun climbing high in the sky. The moment had arrived. The emissaries would be arriving momentarily. He carefully rolled the scroll, securing it with a silken ribbon. He rose, prepared to confront the day's trials. He carried the weight of his knowledge, a burden and a solemn vow. The price of lasting peace, he knew, demanded unwavering vigilance, and a willingness to undertake what was necessary, however difficult or repugnant. The Duke's summons. The aroma of ginger and scallion sizzling in hot oil usually heralded the start of Sun Izu's day, a welcome fragrance that mingled with the earthy scent of the Dukist garden outside. This morning, however, the scent was laced with a discordant note of urgency. Lady May, her brow furrowed with concern, moved with a quickened pace around their small kitchen, the clatter of ceramic bowls unusually sharp against the quiet dawn. "More tea, Sun Izu?" she asked, her voice a touch too high, as she poured steaming liquid into his waiting cup. He took the cup, his gaze meeting hers, a silent acknowledgement of her unspoken anxiety. "Thank you, May," he said softly, the warmth of the tea grounding him. He took a slow sip, savoring the subtle bitterness. "The air feels different today, doesn't it?" Before she could reply, the rhythmic pounding of hooves echoed on the packed earth path leading to their cottage. A moment later, a breathless young man in the crimson livery of the Duke's Guard skidded to a halt before their gate, dust swirling around his polished boots. "Sun Izu," he called out, his voice cracking with a mixture of nervousness and importance. "I bear urgent tidings from Duke Guang." Sun Izu placed his teacup down gently, the delicate porcelain clinking softly against the wooden table. He rose, his movements fluid and unhurried, a stark contrast to the messenger's agitation. "Open the gate, May," he instructed, his voice calm and steady. Lady May hurried to obey, her hands trembling slightly as she unlatched the wooden barrier. The messenger strode through, his eyes wide as he took in the simple dwelling and the unassuming figure of the men he had been sent to summon. He clearly expected something grander. "Sun Izu," he repeated, regaining a semblance of composure, "Duke Guang commands your immediate presence at the palace. Barbarian raids along the northern border have intensified. The Duke seeks your counsel." He held out a scroll sealed with the Duke's personal insignia, a jade dragon coiled around a bronze sword. Sun Izu took the scroll, his fingers tracing the intricate carving of the dragon. The jade felt cool and smooth beneath his touch, a stark contrast to the heat that flared in his mind as he considered the implications of the summons. Raids were one thing, intensified raids quite another. This suggested a coordinated effort, perhaps even a full-scale invasion brewing. He broke the seal, the crisp snap echoing in the morning air, and scanned the message. The Duke's words were terse and to the point, leaving no room for doubt about the severity of the situation. "I understand," Sun Izu said, handing the scroll back to the messenger. "Tell the Duke I will be there within the hour." The messenger, visibly relieved to have delivered his message, bowed stiffly. "I shall inform His Grace immediately," he said, before turning and remounting his horse, spurring it back down the path in a flurry of dust. Sun Izu watched him go, his mind already racing, assessing the variables, calculating potential strategies. The scent of ginger and scallions now seemed cloying, a reminder of the normalcy that had just been shattered. Lady May approached him, her face etched with worry. "Barbarians. Is it as bad as they say?" He turned to her, his expression softening. He knew her fear was not just for him, but for the people, for their land. "It is concerning," he admitted, choosing his words carefully. "But we will face it. We always do." He placed a hand on her cheek, his thumb gently stroking her skin. "I must go, May. The Duke needs guidance. But do not fear. I will use all my knowledge, all my skill, to ensure the safety of our people." He released her, his gaze sweeping over their small cottage, the garden she tended with such care, the life they had built together. It was a life worth fighting for. "Prepare my traveling clothes, May," he instructed, turning towards the house. "And perhaps a small pouch of dried plums. The palace fare is often bland." As Lady May hurried inside, Sun Izu stepped into the garden. He walked among the rows of vegetables, his fingers brushing against the leaves, grounding himself in the tangible world before plunging into the abstract realm of war. He paused by a small plum tree, its branches heavy with ripening fruit. He plucked a single plum, its skin still cool from the morning dew, and brought it to his lips. The sweetness was sharp, a fleeting reminder of the simple pleasures that were so easily lost in times of conflict. He finished the plum, tossing the pit into the earth, a silent promise of renewal. He would do everything in his power to protect this, to ensure that the seeds of peace could continue to grow, even in the shadow of war. Inside the cottage, Lady May laid out his traveling clothes, a simple tunic of dark blue, sturdy trousers, and a cloak of muted gray, designed to blend into the landscape. She moved with practiced efficiency, her movements betraying the anxiety she tried to conceal. She knew Sun Izu's capabilities, his brilliance in strategy, but she also knew the dangers he would face. She had seen war before, had witnessed its brutality, its senseless waste. She added a small, intricately embroidered pouch to the pile. It contained not gold or jewels, but a collection of medicinal herbs, ginger root for warmth, dried mint for clarity, and a small packet of ginseng for strength. A silent prayer accompanied each item. When Sun Izu emerged from the garden, his face was calm, his eyes clear. He surveyed the traveling clothes laid out on the bed with a critical eye. "Thank you, May," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. He began to dress, his movements deliberate and precise. As he fastened the clasp of his cloak, he turned to Lady May, his gaze unwavering. "I do not go seeking war, May," he said softly. "I go seeking peace. But peace, sometimes, demands a willingness to fight." He took her hands in his grip firm and reassuring. "Do not worry. I will return. And when I do, we will plant a new plum tree, one that will bear fruit for many years to come." He released her hands and turned to leave. At the doorway, he paused, looking back at her one last time. A faint smile played on his lips. "And May," he added, "perhaps you could prepare a pot of your special honeyed ginger tea for my return. I suspect I will have need of it." Then, without another word, he stepped out into the morning light, leaving Lady May standing in the doorway, her heart heavy with apprehension, but also filled with a quiet hope. She watched him walk down the path, his figure growing smaller with each step, until he disappeared from view, swallowed by the rising sun and the looming shadow of war. Before the Duke. The palace dominated the horizon, a gilded plea for the enduring armistice Sun Izu envisioned. Roofs of burnished gold, like capsized galleons, reached for a sky stained the somber hue of twilight grapes. The air, thick with the ghost of incense and the heavy, sweet perfume of unseen blooms, pressed down. His cart, a humble conveyance drawn by a placid ox, crunched across the immense, flagstone courtyard, the sound bouncing off walls guarded by stone chimeras. He shifted the weight of the bamboo scrolls bound to his back. The Art of War. A life's wisdom culled into 13 succinct doctrines, 13 avenues to sidestep the very grim theater of this imposing structure. He wasn't a warrior in the traditional sense, but a tactician, a conductor of strategies. His hope, that his insights would prove keener than any steel. At the foot of the sweeping staircase, 2 sentinels, their bronzed armor catching the waning light, halted his progress. Their faces, stolid masks of obligation, betrayed nothing. Sun Izu of Wu, one demanded, his voice a resonant boom. Sun Izu inclined his head. I am. A brief inspection followed, their hands lingering a heartbeat too long on the scrolls, before they granted him passage. Each upward step thrummed against the rising tide of apprehension in his gut. Not fear, precisely, but an awareness of the immense expectations, the delicate power plays he was about to navigate. The throne room was a vastness meant to inspire reverence. Colossal pillars, like petrified redwoods, upheld a frescoed ceiling depicting legendary conflicts, heroes frozen in eternal struggle. Courtiers gathered in muted groups, their silken robes whispering like rustling leaves in a fading autumn. The air here felt arid, cold, with a faint, metallic undercurrent from polished weaponry. Duke Guang sat on a raised platform, an emblem of formidable composure. His face, framed by a meticulously groomed beard, was mapped with the furrows of sleeplessness and onerous decisions. To his right stood royal advisor Chen, his age evident only in the almost imperceptible tremor in his clasped hands. His countenance remained smooth, unreadable, a paragon of practiced diplomacy. Sun Izu advanced, his footfalls deliberate and soundless against the glossy stone. He knelt before the Duke, lowering his gaze. Your Grace, he stated, his voice clear and unwavering, I have answered your summons. Sun Izu, the Duke responded, his voice steeped in weariness. Your renown precedes you. It is said you possess an unparalleled understanding of warfare. He motioned towards the scrolls. Is it true you have systematized this knowledge? Indeed, Your Grace. These scrolls encapsulate my observations, my strategies for achieving victory with minimal effusion of life. Advisor Chen approached, his gaze keen and dissecting. Minimal bloodshed is a laudable ambition, Master Sunday. However, these are not abstract musings we entertain. Marauders assault our borders, razing villages and plundering our harvests. We require strength, not theories. Sun Izu rose, meeting Chen's gaze squarely. Strength devoid of strategy is merely a club, Advisor Chen. It can crush, but it cannot govern. My strategies offer mastery, a means to foresee the adversary, to leverage their vulnerabilities, to secure triumph before the battle even commences. He unstrapped the scrolls and presented them to a waiting attendant. With a bow, the attendant conveyed them to a table before the Duke. Guang leaned forward, his eyes tracing the tightly furled bamboo. 13 scrolls. An exhaustive treatise, indeed. But can words truly deter a ravening horde? Words, Your Grace, can galvanize armies, beguile foes, and dictate the very landscape of engagement. They form the bedrock upon which victory is constructed. Chen neared the table, his fingers delineating the shape of the scrolls. We possess seasoned commanders, men who have spilled their blood for Wu for decades. What can a scholar, one who has never wielded a blade, offer that they cannot? With respect, Advisor Chen, Sun Izu countered, his voice resolute, a commander who relies solely upon experience is a prisoner of their past. They perceive only what they have witnessed before. I offer a novel perspective, a re-envisioning of the art of warfare. The Duke gestured for Chen to recede. He selected a scroll, unfurling it with care. The characters, meticulously rendered, formed precise columns of script. He perused it silently for a long moment, his brow creased in concentration. These are unorthodox concepts, Master Sun, he observed finally, his voice tinged with hesitation. You advocate deception, feigning weakness to ensnare the enemy. Is this not dishonorable? All warfare is predicated on deception, Sun Izu rejoined. It is not a question of honor, Your Grace, but of survival. To reveal one's strength is to invite aggression. To conceal one's intentions is to control the course of battle. Chen cleared his throat. Such ploys may succeed against undisciplined rabble, but the barbarians are astute and relentless. They will not succumb to such elementary trickery. Astuteness can be anticipated, and relentlessness can be wielded against itself, Sun Izu countered. The crux lies in understanding the adversary, in knowing their strengths and frailties better than they themselves. The Duke rolled up the scroll, his countenance pensive. You champion selecting one's battles, averting direct confrontation whenever feasible. Is this not akin to cowardice? It is akin to circumspection, Your Grace. A battle avoided is a triumph achieved without bloodshed. To engage only when victory is assured is the hallmark of a discerning leader, not a craven one. Chen shook his head, his disapproval palpable. These are perilous notions, Duke Guang. They erode the very foundations of our military heritage. We have invariably confronted our enemies head-on, with valor and force. To embrace these, nuanced strategies would be to court vulnerability and, ultimately, downfall. Sun Izu turned to face Chen squarely. Force without wisdom is a perilous instrument, Advisor Chen. It breeds recklessness and, inevitably, destruction. My strategies offer a pathway to victory that safeguards our resources, protects our populace, and secures enduring stability. The Duke sighed, massaging his temples. The weight of his burden was almost tangible. These are weighty matters, Master Sunday. I require time for deliberation. He turned to Chen. What is your counsel, Advisor? Chen inclined his head respectfully. With all due deference, Your Grace, I urge caution. Master Sun's theories are untested and potentially disruptive. We should place our faith in the wisdom of our seasoned commanders and the might of our well-trained army. The Duke nodded slowly, his gaze drifting back to Sun Izu. I thank you for your counsel, Master Sunday. You may withdraw for now. I will summon you again once I have reached a resolution. Sun Izu bowed, his expression unreadable. He had presented his argument, laid out his strategies. The decision now rested with the Duke. As he turned to depart, he understood the struggle was far from concluded. He had planted the seeds of a new perspective, but whether they would germinate in the fertile soil of will remain to be determined. The cost of peace, he knew, was frequently a protracted and demanding contest. The concubine's challenge. A suppressed cough snaked through the assembled court, chased by the whisper of silk robes adjusting on nervous frames. Duke Guang, who had been thoughtfully grooming his beard since Sun Izu concluded, finally broke the silence. His voice, laced with amusement, resonated through the hall. Master Sun, he began, eyes fixed on the composed scholar, your theories, intrigue. Talk of guile, of minimized conflict, of triumph without engaging. Yet, war, as we've always known it, is a brutal dance of flesh and iron. How can such exquisite concepts translate to the grim reality of the battlefield? Sun Izu remained a study in composure, his face an impenetrable mask. Great Duke, a strategy's delicacy lies solely in its wielder's hand. Principles endure, irrespective of implement or player. A ripple of murmurs pulsed through the assembled officials. Royal Advisor Chen, thunder etched on his face, shifted his weight, biting back his retort. A sly smile played on Duke Guang's lips. Very well. Let us subject these principles to trial by fire. Rumors abound, Master Sun, that your methods border on the unorthodox. That you posit anyone can be forged into a soldier, given proper tutelage. He paused for dramatic effect, then with a flourish, gestured towards a side door. As it swung inward, a cluster of women was revealed, not soldiers, but the Duke's own harem. Draped in vibrant silks, their hair crafted into gravity-defying sculptures, faces painted with the finest artistry, they giggled, a blend of trepidation and intrigue coloring their expressions. Consort Hua, famed for her ethereal beauty, fluttered her lashes, while Consort Lien, celebrated for her keen intellect, appraised the scene with a sharp, assessing gaze. Master Sun, the Duke proclaimed, his voice thick with playful challenge, I task you with instructing my concubines. Transform these blossoms into warriors. Impart the art of war upon them. Succeed in this improbable endeavor, and you will have earned my full belief in your strategic prowess. A wave of laughter crashed through the court. Courtiers exchanged knowing glances, convinced this was merely an elaborate jest. Some of the concubines even tittered, misinterpreting the Duke's words as an amusing game. General Zhao, simmering with barely restrained animosity since Sun Izu's arrival, pounced on the opening. He stepped forward, his voice dripping with disdain. With utmost respect, Great Duke, this is ludicrous. These are refined women of the court, skilled in the arts of music, poetry, and seduction. Weapons and war are alien to them. To entrust them to Master Sun is akin to demanding a fish take wing. He shot Sun Izu a dismissive glare. Perhaps his scrolls are better suited for amusing children than leading legions. Sun Tzu, unperturbed, observed the concubines with sharp focus, assessing their inherent capabilities. He peered beyond the silks and painted countenances, discerning individual strengths and latent weaknesses. He recognized the spark of ambition in Consort Lien's eyes, the veiled determination in Consort Hua's seemingly frivolous demeanor. He turned back to the Duke, his voice calm and resolute. "Great Duke, I embrace the challenge. Grant me command, and I shall demonstrate that even the most delicate flower can bloom into an imposing force." Silence descended, thick with disbelief. The courtiers stared at Sun Tzu as though he had sprouted a second head. General Zhao's face contorted with incredulity, his rage barely contained. He could scarcely believe that this scholar, this outsider, dared to accept such an outlandish task. It was a direct affront to his experience, his years of devoted service. Duke Guang, however, radiated delight. He clapped with glee, his eyes dancing with anticipation. "Excellent. You shall have everything you require, training grounds, armaments, and absolute authority over the concubines. You begin at dawn." He paused, his gaze hardening perceptibly. "But be warned, Master Sunday, failure is not an option. Should you falter, I shall conclude that your art of war is nothing more than hollow rhetoric." As Sun Tzu bowed and turned to leave, General Zhao shouldered past several courtiers to intercept him. His face burned crimson, his voice a menacing growl. "You are a fool, scholar. You have no comprehension of what awaits you. These women are spoiled and unruly. They will scoff at your authority, disregard your orders, and turn your vaunted strategies into a farce. Your humiliation will be complete, your reputation shattered." Sun Tzu halted, pivoting to face the general. His expression remained serene, yet a steely glint shone in his eyes. "General Zhao, your skepticism is understandable. But I maintain that potential resides within every soul, awaiting ignition. My task is to unearth that potential and nurture it. Perhaps, were you to observe attentively, you might even glean a lesson or two." He left the general sputtering, fists clenched tightly. The general watched him depart, consumed by a burning desire for his downfall. He vowed to witness Sun Tzu's ignominious defeat, to demonstrate to the Duke that traditional warfare, forged in the fires of experience, reigned supreme over the scholar's whimsical notions. The following day dawned bright and cloudless. The concubines, still adorned in their luxurious silks, gathered with ill-concealed reluctance at the training grounds. They appeared disoriented and apprehensive, unsure of what ordeal awaited them. Consort Hua yawned theatrically, while Consort Lien surveyed the scene with a blend of curiosity and calculation. Sun Tzu stood before them, clad in simple, austere robes. In his hands, he held a small, lacquered box. Opening it, he revealed a set of flags, crimson for advance, saffron for defense, azure for retreat. "Ladies," he began, his voice clear and commanding, "today marks the beginning of your transformation into soldiers. You will cultivate discipline, obedience, and a mastery of war. You will shed your pampered identities and become warriors, ready to safeguard our realm." A chorus of protests erupted. Consort Hua lamented that her delicate hands were ill-suited for weaponry. Another concubine wailed that the training would ravage her complexion. Sun Tzu raised a hand, silencing the objections. "I acknowledge your concerns. But I assure you, this training will not diminish your beauty or your femininity. Rather, it will amplify your strength, your intellect, and your confidence. It will teach you to think strategically, to act decisively, and to surmount any impediment." He proceeded to elucidate the foundational principles of his art of war, using accessible analogies and relevant examples. He emphasized the significance of understanding oneself and one's adversaries, of selecting advantageous terrain, and of exploiting vulnerabilities. Consort Lien listened with rapt attention, her brow furrowed in concentration, while Consort Hua fidgeted restlessly, clearly disinterested. He divided the concubines into two squads, appointing Consort Lien as one leader and Consort Hua the other. He explained that they would be responsible for executing his commands and ensuring their squads adhered to his directives. Then came the initial exercise, marching in formation. The concubines, accustomed to graceful dances and leisurely strolls, struggled to maintain alignment and consistency. They stumbled, giggled, and complained, constantly disrupting the flow. Sun Tzu observed them with unwavering patience. He did not raise his voice or lose his composure. Instead, he reiterated his instructions, correcting their errors with quiet precision. After hours of relentless practice, the concubines were physically and emotionally drained. Consort Hua flung down her flag in exasperation. "This is impossible," she cried. "We will never accomplish this. It is a futile endeavor." Sun Tzu approached her, his eyes unwavering. "Consort Hua, you are now a leader. Your squad looks to you for inspiration and fortitude. If you surrender, they too will concede defeat. But if you persevere, if you demonstrate that overcoming this obstacle is attainable, they will follow your lead." He retrieved the flag and placed it back in her hands. The path to mastery is never paved with ease. It demands dedication, discipline, and a willingness to learn from setbacks. But I believe you possess the capacity to triumph. You simply need to have faith in yourself. Consort Hua gazed at the flag, then at Sun Tzu, then at her squad. She saw the doubt and discouragement mirrored in their expressions. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and raised the flag aloft. "Very well," she declared, her voice resolute. "Let us try again. We shall not be broken." And so, the training persevered. Slowly but surely, the concubines began to exhibit improvement. They learned to march in formation, to wield the practice weapons with growing skill, and to grasp the fundamentals of strategy. They continued to make mistakes, yet they learned from each one. General Zhao observed the training from afar, his expression a complex tapestry of scorn and grudging respect. He remained convinced that Sun Tzu's efforts were doomed, yet he could not deny the undeniable progress displayed by the concubines. He wondered if, perhaps, the scholar's theories held more substance than he initially surmised. The price of peace, he mused, might be higher than he had ever imagined, and deception, perhaps, a more powerful weapon than mere brute force. Dividing the ranks. Sun Tzu's gaze swept across the assembled concubines, a vibrant tapestry of silk and scent utterly unlike the hardened soldiery he commanded. Gilded ornaments winked in the morning light, betraying the trepidation swirling within their eyes. He let the silence hang heavy, a palpable weight settling upon them, before declaring, "Today, we commence." Warfare transcends mere brawn, it demands discipline, strategy, and unwavering obedience. You will move as a single entity, react instantaneously, grasp the deadly ballet between survival and demise. A nervous titter rippled through the ranks, an expected reaction he swiftly dismissed, refocusing on the task ahead. "I shall organize you into 2 companies, he announced, his voice resonating with authority. "Each unit will be led by a commander, responsible for maintaining discipline and overseeing training. They are to be my extensions, my eyes, and my hands in this endeavor." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to permeate the atmosphere, the giggles now replaced by a hushed expectancy. His gaze landed on Consort Hua, famed for her sharp intellect and sharper wit. Her beauty was undeniable, yet a spark of defiance flickered within her eyes, intriguing him. "Consort Hua," he stated, his tone respectful but firm. "You will lead the first company." A collective gasp swept through the gathering, mirroring Consort Hua's own astonishment. Her perfectly painted lips parted in disbelief. "Me," she squeaked, her voice uncharacteristically shrill. "But I know nothing of combat. I swoon at the merest prick of a needle." Sun Tzu remained unmoved. "You possess qualities far exceeding mere battlefield experience. Your intelligence, resourcefulness, and innate authority are the very bedrock of leadership." A flush crept up Consort Hua's neck. She started to protest, but he forestalled her. "Your role is not to be a warrior, but to guide them. To comprehend the strategies, enforce the discipline, and ensure your company's absolute obedience." Turning to Consort Lien, a woman of quiet grace and keen observation, he noted her standing slightly apart, her brow furrowed in thought, already assessing the situation. Unlike Hua, surprise was absent from her countenance. "Consort Lien," Sun Tzu announced, "you will command the second company." Consort Lien inclined her head, her movements possessing a serene elegance. "I accept," she replied, her voice soft yet resolute, a hint of concealed strength belying her delicate facade. A wave of murmurs washed through the ranks. "Hua, the Duke's darling." "Leading us," one concubine whispered, incredulity lacing her voice. "And Lien. She's practically mute." Sun Tzu raised a hand, silencing the burgeoning dissent. "These appointments are rooted not in favoritism, but in potential. I perceive within these women the seeds of leadership, the ability to inspire, and the unwavering will to prevail." He stepped back, allowing the newly appointed commanders to advance. Consort Hua, still reeling, adjusted her elaborate headwear, her face a mask of bewildered indignation. Consort Lien, in contrast, moved with composed assurance, her gaze already cataloguing her future charges. Now, Sun Tzu's commanding voice reverberated once more. The first company will assemble to the right. Consort Hua, assume your position at the head of your troops. Consort Hua hesitated, her eyes darting about as if seeking an escape route. But the intensity of Sun Tzu's gaze, coupled with the expectant stares of the other concubines, propelled her forward. With a sigh that spoke volumes, she straightened her shoulders and marched, with as much regal bearing as she could muster, to the designated spot. The concubines shuffled and jostled, forming a haphazard line to her right, a symphony of whispers, suppressed giggles, and clumsy stumbles marking their disarray. Consort Hua fixed them with a glare, her initial shock now morphing into simmering vexation. "Silence," she barked, her voice surprisingly forceful. "Form a line. And cease that infernal giggling, you resemble a gaggle of geese." Her outburst proved effective, silencing the murmurs and eliciting widened eyes. They straightened their postures, a nascent respect beginning to glimmer in their gazes. Meanwhile, Consort Lien was already organizing her company with understated efficiency. Moving among them, her touch gentle yet firm, she guided them into position. Her voice, though soft, was clear and concise, leaving no room for ambiguity. "A line, if you please," she requested, her eyes meeting each woman's in turn. "Stand tall, and focus forward. We are not here for idle chatter or complaints. We are here to learn." Her tranquil demeanor and quiet authority exerted a calming influence, eliciting a surprisingly swift and orderly response. Consort Lien surveyed her troops with a discreet nod of approval. Sun Tzu observed both companies with a discerning eye. He noticed the initial hesitation in Consort Hua's expression gradually yielding to a stubborn resolve. He witnessed the natural authority radiating from Consort Lien, and the respect she effortlessly commanded. He understood that the journey ahead would be protracted and demanding, fraught with resistance and skepticism. However, he also recognized that these women, despite their sheltered lives and lack of military training, possessed the dormant potential to become formidable. All they required was the proper tutelage, effective leadership, and unwavering motivation. And he, Sun Tzu, intended to provide it. "Excellent," he announced, his voice resonating across the courtyard. "Now that the companies are formed, we shall commence. We will first master the fundamental principles of movement. You will learn to march in unison, execute turns with precision, and obey commands without hesitation." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the assembled concubines. "This will not be effortless. It will demand discipline, dedication, and unwavering obedience. But I assure you, the rewards will be substantial. You will learn to defend yourselves, safeguard your loved ones, and contribute to the security of our kingdom." A rare, fleeting smile touched his lips, conveying a sense of unwavering confidence and resolve. "Let us begin. Discipline's price." The noonday heat shimmered above the training field, baking the earth to a fine powder that danced with each shift and step. Sun Tzu, face impassive, surveyed the two assembled companies of concubines. Consort Hua, initial trepidation overcome, gripped her makeshift standard, a silk scarf lashed to a bamboo shaft, with surprising resolve. Beside her, Consort Lien's bearing was as unyielding as tempered steel. Company 1, advanced 10 paces. Sun Tzu's command, crisp and resonant, sliced through the still air. A wave of suppressed laughter rippled through the ranks of Company 1. Several concubines, giggling, inched forward, colliding and dissolving into renewed mirth. "Ladies, please." Consort Hua pleaded, a blush rising on her cheeks. "Show some decorum." An order was given. Her appeal only fueled their amusement. One woman, her ornate headdress gleaming, offered Sun Tzu a mocking curtsy. Another feigned a stumble, clinging to her neighbor and erupting in peals of laughter. Sun Tzu's gaze sharpened. "Company 1, he repeated, his tone edged with steel, advanced 10 paces. Instantly, the levity diminished, replaced by a murmur of nervous anticipation. Yet, their advance remained disjointed, a chaotic jumble of movement. Some moved forward a mere handful of steps, others remained stationary, whispering amongst themselves. Consort Hua, now a picture of mortified frustration, struggled to direct them, but her voice was drowned out by the general disarray. Company 2, under Consort Lien's watch, proved scarcely more disciplined. Though initially more reserved, the spectacle of their counterparts' antics proved too infectious. They began to mimic the stumbles and stifled laughter, their faces bright with suppressed glee. Consort Lien, her customary composure faltering, attempted to regain control, but her words were gentle, almost imploring, and lacked authority. Sun Izu observed, a chilling detachment in his eyes. The air hung heavy with the mingled scents of sweat, dust, and cloying perfume. He watched as his meticulously planned exercise descended into burlesque, his authority undermined by these women who seemed incapable of grasping the stakes. He stepped forward, his shadow lengthening ominously across the parched earth. The laughter ceased abruptly, replaced by a palpable tension. Even the birdsong in the nearby trees seemed to fade. An order was given, he stated, his voice a low, resonant threat. And it was disobeyed. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the ranks. He saw mirth, bewilderment, a flicker of fear, but no genuine comprehension of the ramifications of their actions. In warfare, he continued, obedience is absolute. A single act of insubordination can spell defeat, bring death, and shatter all you hold dear. His gaze locked onto Consort Hua and Consort Lien, their faces now ashen. As commanders, it is your duty to ensure my commands are executed without question. He unsheathed his sword. The polished blade flashed in the sunlight, a brutal counterpoint to the soft silks and delicate jewels adorning the concubines. A collective gasp echoed across the field. You have failed in your duty, he declared, his voice utterly devoid of warmth. Therefore, you will bear the consequences. He turned to the guards stationed at the perimeter. Execute the commanders. A wave of incredulity spread through the assembled officials who had gathered to witness the demonstration. A ripple of hushed protests arose, yet none dared openly defy Sun Izu's decree. The Duke, perched on his dais, watched with morbid fascination, his expression a study in conflicting emotions. Consort Hua recoiled, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears welled, but she stood firm, her eyes fixed on Sun Izu. Consort Lien, pale but composed, simply closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. The guards hesitated, uncertain, conflicted. They had never been ordered to execute women, least of all those of the Duke's inner circle. One, a young man with a telltale tick in his eye, cast a pleading glance at Sun Izu. Sun Izu's voice, like glacial ice, shattered their paralysis. Do you question my authority? The guards flinched, their hesitation evaporated. Two of them advanced, drawing their weapons. The rasp of steel filled the silence. A choked sob escaped Consort Hua. Please, she whimpered, her voice trembling, spare us. Consort Lien remained still, eyes shut tight. A lone tear trickled down her cheek. Sun Izu watched, his face a mask. This was not about malice, he reasoned. It was about setting an example. It was about instilling a sense of consequence. It was, ultimately, about saving lives. The guards raised their swords high. Sunlight glinted on the honed edges, transforming them into shimmering arcs of death. A scream erupted, piercing the stunned quiet. It came from a concubine in Company 1, her eyes wide with terror. She crumpled to the ground, consumed by sobs. The remaining women stood frozen, their faces masks of stark horror. The reality of their situation had finally sunk in. This was no frivolous game. This was no mere performance. This was war, stark and unforgiving. The guards brought the gleaming blades down. A lesson in command. An oppressive stillness blanketed the training grounds, heavier than any storm. The perfumed air, once a sweet comfort, now reeked, a funereal incense. Duke Guang's features, rigid with disbelief, crumbled into a landscape of horror. The two consorts lay motionless, their ornate gowns sullied by the dusty earth. You've slain them. The words escaped the Duke as a fragile exhalation, rife with incredulity. He faltered, leaning heavily on royal advisor Chen, whose face was a rigid mask of contained outrage. Chen remained silent, his grip on the Duke's sleeve of ice. Immobile, Sun Izu held the Wei sword, its polished surface reflecting the waning sunlight. With measured grace, he lowered and sheathed it, the click echoed unervingly in the palpable quiet. They defied a direct order, Sun Izu pronounced, his tone even, devoid of inflection. In warfare, insubordination breeds chaos, and chaos delivers defeat. My directive was unambiguous. They understood it. They chose to ignore it. But they were women. Royal consorts. The Duke sputtered, his composure dissolving. This was merely a drill. Couldn't a less drastic penalty have sufficed? A reprimand. Confinement. Sun Tzu's gaze, sharp as honed flint, settled on the Duke. Conflict knows no gender, Your Grace. The invaders will offer no leniency for mere women. Nor does the tumult of battle allow for reprimands or jails. In war, a commander's words are absolute. To disregard them is to invite death. This is not sport, Your Grace, but preparation for survival. The Duke recoiled, as though physically struck. Survival. These are ladies of the court. Survival from what threat? The survival of your realm, Your Grace, Sun Tzu countered, unwavering. The barbarian hordes will not pause to admire silken fabrics or mourn comely faces. They will slaughter, plunder, and raze. If your soldiers are not disciplined to obey without hesitation, if they waver or falter when facing peril, they will be butchered. And with them goes your kingdom. Chen's voice, tight with protest, finally cut through the air. With all due respect, Master Sun, surely a less severe measure could have instilled obedience. These were favored consorts. Their demise will fuel dissent and animosity within the palace walls. Sun Tzu inclined his head in a brief acknowledgement of Chen's objection. Discord is a noxious weed, Advisor Chen, one that must be extirpated. Resentment can be forged into resolve. The surviving consorts will learn a vital lesson from this. They will now realize that their very lives, and the lives of those they are sworn to protect, hinge upon unwavering obedience. He gestured toward the remaining women, huddled together, their faces drained of color. Some wept silently, others stared blankly, eyes dilated with fear. Observe them, Your Grace, Sun Tzu's voice resonated across the open space. Do you witness terror? Yes. But do you also perceive comprehension? They now grasp the weight of authority. They now appreciate the price of dereliction. They will not repeat the same error. He turned back to the Duke, his gaze unflinching. A general who cannot enforce his commands is no general, merely a hollow effigy, leading his troops to slaughter. I am here to sculpt soldiers, not courtly amusements. I am here to arm them with the will to survive, not to enchant. And I will do whatever is required to accomplish this objective. The Duke stared at Sun Tzu, his face a canvas of warring emotions, outrage battling with a nascent understanding. He himself had brought this man, this implacable force, to safeguard his kingdom. He was aware that Sun Tzu's methods were unorthodox, but he had not envisioned such ruthlessness. He glanced at the corpses of consorts Hua and Lian, their still bodies a grim testament to the cost of defiance. He looked at the surviving women, their faces marked with fear and newfound respect. And he looked at Sun Tzu, his expression a blank slate, his eyes reflecting the cold, hard light of a man who understood the brutal calculus of warfare. A chill snaked its way down the Duke's spine. He had always prided himself on his fairness and compassion. He valued diplomacy and negotiation. But he also knew the barbarians were an unyielding foe, driven by avarice and a hunger for domination. Perhaps, he reasoned, a different kind of strength was needed. Maybe, compassion had no place on the field of battle. He turned toward Chen, his voice recovering its former authority. See to the proper rights for the deceased, Advisor. And ensure their families receive just compensation. Chen bowed stiffly, his disapproval lingering. As you command, Your Grace. The Duke then faced Sun Tzu, his gaze now touched with a grudging respect. Continue with the training, Master Sunday. I trust you know your course. Sun Tzu lowered his head in a slight bow. I do, Your Grace. Now, with your permission, there is much to be done. He turned to the remaining consorts, his voice sharp and commanding. Form ranks. We will recommence. This time, there will be no failures. The consorts hurried to obey, their movements awkward yet resolute. The exercise resumed, the atmosphere thick with tension and the echo of Sun Tzu's directives. The Duke watched for a long while, his mind in turmoil. He had sought a route to peace, yet he now bore witness to a lesson in war's harsh arithmetic. A lesson paid for with the lives of 2 women, a lesson etched forever in his memory. He turned and slowly made his way back toward the palace, Chen following silently. The aroma of cherry blossom seemed less potent now, supplanted by the metallic tang of fear and the burdensome weight of accountability. He had entrusted the destiny of his kingdom to this enigmatic strategist. He could only hope that Sun Tzu's methods, however severe, would ultimately secure the peace he so desperately craved. The general appointed. The training yard was a vacuum of sound. Not a sob, not a tremble disturbed the heavy air. Only the whisper of silk marked the presence of the 178 remaining women, their faces masks of pale resolve. Yesterday's brutal lesson had shattered any lingering fantasies of courtly grace. They were recruits now, tempered in the fires of fear and absolute obedience. Sun Tzu remained a statue on the dais, his countenance inscrutable. Unmoving since the executions, his rigid posture contrasted sharply with the agitation still clinging to Duke Guang and Advisor Chen. His eyes traversed the ranks, assessing their bearing, the glint in their eyes, seeking any flicker of insubordination. Finding none, he broke the silence, his words precise and devoid of inflection. The company is diminished. Leadership is required. He paused, letting the pronouncement settle. Concubine Li, advance. A slender girl with delicate features, her gaze haunted, obeyed instantly. She moved with newfound decisiveness, her silk garments sighing softly against the packed earth. She knelt before the platform, head bowed. Yesterday, you displayed initiative, Sun Tzu observed, his gaze fixed on her. You anticipated the command, attempted to realign the formation. Your efforts were wanting. But comprehension was evident. Do you grasp this? Yes, master, she whispered, her voice thin as spun silk. You are now a captain, commanding 20 women. Their obedience, their discipline, their preparedness, these are your burden. Failure will invite yesterday's retribution. Li's body stiffened, but she held her ground. I understand, master. I will not falter. Sun Tzu inclined his head, his gaze shifting to another. Concubine Mei, step forth. Older than Li, Mei possessed a quiet strength etched onto her face. Once a favored consort, lauded for her intellect and even temper, she now emanated grim purpose. You questioned the orders, Sun Tzu stated, his tone even. You sought elucidation. In battle, such inquiry is a rare indulgence. Yet, your questions betrayed a strategic bent. Do you comprehend? I am learning, master, Mei replied, her voice firmer than Li's. You are now a lieutenant, overseeing 50 women. You will guide the captain's training, ensuring unit cohesion. Your charge is to foresee weaknesses and address them before they fester. Do you comprehend? Yes, master. I will fulfill my duty. His attention pivoted. Concubine Hua, advance. A striking figure, Hua was renowned for her beauty and fiery spirit. The previous day, she had been among the loudest in her defiance, her eyes blazing. Now, her gaze was unwavering, her stance resolute. You resisted, Sun Tzu remarked, without judgment. You challenged authority. In war, such defiance can be a potent weapon, if properly harnessed. It speaks of a will to endure, a refusal to yield. Do you comprehend? I understand, master, Hua responded, her voice resonating with conviction. You are now a commander, charged with 100 women. You will dictate the overall strategy of training, adapting to shifting conditions and anticipating the foe's initiatives. The success of the whole falls to you. Do you comprehend? I understand, master. I will not disappoint. With the appointments finalized, Sun Tzu rose. He scrutinized the assembled women, his gaze unwavering and sharp. Your former lives are extinguished, he declared. No longer are you concubines, diversions, or mere ornaments. You are soldiers now, warriors. The survival of both yourselves, and of Wu, hinges on your obedience, your discipline, and your unwavering dedication to the art of war. Let action drown out words. He turned, departing, leaving the newly appointed officers to assume their roles. A new energy thrummed in the air, a sense of purpose previously absent. The women moved with a precision that belied their past, absorbing their lessons with startling speed. They were transforming. Duke Guang watched from the periphery, his face a turmoil of conflicting feelings. The previous day's butchery remained vivid, etched into his memory. Yet, the metamorphosis in the training yard was undeniable. The indulged concubines had been hammered into a regimented fighting force, fear giving way to a hard resolve. Advisor Chen stood beside him, his expression disapproving. This is folly, your grace, he grumbled. These women are no warriors. They disgrace our army. The Duke sighed, his gaze fixed on Sun Izu as he oversaw the drill. Perhaps, he conceded quietly. But I perceive something more, Chen. I see compliance. I see a desire to obey. I see the seeds of combat. Virtue sorely lacking in our soldiers. But at what price? Chen protested. The dignity of the court, the lives of innocent women. The price of inaction is steeper, the Duke interrupted, his tone hardening. The invaders will not hesitate to butcher our people, to reduce our settlements to ash, to shackle our people. We must be ready to meet them with equal barbarity, equal ferocity. He turned to Chen, his eyes alight with newfound resolve. My decision stands. It will not be rescinded. He strode into the training yard, immediately commanding the attention of the concubines. They ceased their exercises and knelt as one. Sun Izu approached, his expression unreadable. Your Grace, he acknowledged, his tone respectful but not obsequious. The Duke nodded, his gaze locked on Sun Izu. I have witnessed enough, Master Sun, he proclaimed. I have seen your methods, your discipline, your power to shape these women into fighting shape. I am assured that you alone can prepare Wu for the coming conflict. He paused, drawing a breath. Therefore, I, Duke Guan of Wu, hereby designate you General of the Wu Army. You will wield unchecked command over all personnel, all resources, all tactics. Your word is paramount. A collective gasp rippled through the training yard. The concubines looked up in astonishment, eyes wide with disbelief. Advisor Chen surged forward, face crimson with indignation. Your Grace, you cannot be serious, he sputtered. To elevate a commoner, a foreigner, to lead our forces is an affront to our heritage, to our customs. The Duke silenced him with a gesture. I have weighed the ramifications, Chen, he asserted, his voice firm. I appreciate the risks. But I believe that Master Sun alone can safeguard Wu. I entrust my faith to his vision, his strategy, his unwavering dedication to triumph. He turned back to Sun Izu, his eyes full of hope. General Sun, he declared, his voice resonant with emotion. I place the destiny of Wu in your hands. Do not fail me. Sun Izu knelt, his expression unchanged. I will not fail you, Your Grace, he replied, his voice ringing with unwavering conviction. I will guide the Wu forces to victory. I will shield our kingdom from the invaders. I will secure lasting peace for our people. He rose, his gaze sweeping across the concubines, the Duke, and Advisor Chen. His eyes burned with a fierce intensity that quelled all dissent. Training resumes, he commanded, his voice booming with authority. There is much to accomplish. We have a realm to save. Mapping the battlefield. The Duke's command, echoing in Sun Tzu's thoughts, pressed down on him, an invisible weight heavier than the ceremonial robes he now wore. General. The appellation felt unfamiliar, yet bore the burden of a nation's fragile hope, perched on the razor's edge of conflict. He faced a table spread with maps, scrolls that meticulously charted Wu and its environs. Inked rivers snaked like gleaming threads, expansive forests spread in verdant patches, and mountain ranges jutted with jagged, umber peaks. More than mere drawings, they were the sinews and skeleton of future battlefields, silent witnesses to impending strife. His calloused fingertip traced the ragged line dividing Wu from the Shu barbarians. The border, a fractured representation of constant raids and skirmishes, snaked across the parchment. He zeroed in on the mountain passes, the constricting defile that dictated movement, the rivers that offered passage or defense. He understood victory stemmed not merely from martial strength, but from an intimate knowledge of the terrain, transforming the very land into a weapon. The maps, though expertly rendered by court artisans, lacked visceral truth. They lacked the intimate understanding gleaned only from boots on the soil, the feel of the wind's breath, the subtle omens betraying enemy presence. He needed eyes and ears deep within Shu territory. He needed Wei. He summoned a runner, a young man flushed with anticipation, breathless at finding himself before the new general. Find Captain Wei, Sun Izu instructed, his voice a controlled rumble. Tell him his presence is required at once. Wei materialized swiftly, his movements as fluid and silent as a shadow peeling from the wall. A man sculpted by relentless danger, he was lean and tough, with eyes reflecting too much death and hardship. A latticework of fine lines, etched by sun and wind, mapped his weathered face, each a silent testament to years spent policing the border. He wore the unadorned leather of a scout, a quiver of arrows slung across his back. General, Wei greeted, bowing low, his voice a dry whisper barely audible above the rustling silk banners hanging within the command tent. You sent for me? Sun Izu gestured towards the maps. I require intelligence, Wei, information these charts cannot provide. He indicated a particularly dense wood bordering Shu lands. This, the Whispering Woods. The maps depict only trees, but what secrets lie hidden within? Are there concealed paths? Streams suitable for navigation? Where are the Shu encampments? What is their strength in numbers? Wei's eyes narrowed, his gaze skimming the map, absorbing details with ingrained efficiency. The Whispering Woods are a maw, General. Many enter, few return. I am aware of the peril, Sun Izu countered, his tone unwavering. It is precisely why I entrust this task to you. I need you to infiltrate Shu territory, to observe their movements, to gauge their strengths and weaknesses. I must know what awaits us. Wei straightened, his shoulders squaring with resolve. It shall be done, General. Take a small company, Sun Izu cautioned. No more than 5 men. Concealment is paramount. Avoid open conflict unless unavoidable. Your mission is observation, not engagement. He paused, his gaze locking with Wei's. And Wei, return. I require your report. Wu's destiny may hinge upon it. Wei bowed again, his eyes gleaming with unwavering purpose. I will not fail you, General. Sun Izu followed his departure, the scout fading into the palace's sprawling corridors. A prickle of unease, a familiar tightening in his gut, surfaced. Dispatching men into harm's way was never painless, even when necessary. He knew the odds favored the Shu, that their warriors were ferocious and unyielding, that the Whispering Woods were a snare. Yet, he also knew Wei was unmatched, a master of stealth and survival, a man who could slip through the wilderness unseen, like a specter. Returning to the maps, Sun Izu began outlining a route, picturing Wei's progress, anticipating the trials ahead. He marked potential ambush sites, identified water sources, and calculated distances. He wasn't merely studying a map, he was traversing the landscape in his mind's eye, feeling the slickness of the mud, hearing the murmur of leaves, inhaling the scent of pine and damp earth. He needed to comprehend the Shu, not just their numbers and weaponry, but their mindset, their customs, their fears. What fueled their raids into Wu territory? Was it simple avarice, or something deeper? Were they driven by desperation, hunger, a need to safeguard their own lands? Understanding their motives held the key to predicting their actions, anticipating their movements. He devoted hours to the maps, his mind churning, his thoughts surging like a swollen river. He consulted ancient texts, scrolls chronicling the history of the Shu tribes, their alliances, their betrayals, their legendary heroes. He questioned scholars, probing them about the Shu language, their religious convictions, their social structure. He absorbed every fragment of information, piecing together a mosaic of knowledge, a comprehensive portrait of the enemy. As dusk painted long shadows across the command tent, Sun Izu experienced a surge of intuition. He recognized the Shu were not a unified entity, but a collection of clans and tribes, each with its own ambitions and territories. He spotted a possible chink in their armor, a fracture that could be exploited. He summoned a scribe and began dictating a series of carefully worded messages, designed to ignite discord and suspicion among the Shu tribes. He promised pacts, offered inducements, and threatened retribution. He understood the might of deceit, the art of manipulating adversaries, turning them against one another. The price of security, he knew, was often steeped in betrayal and bloodshed. It was a harsh truth, but one he was prepared to embrace. He would employ every instrument at his disposal, every ruse and every stratagem, to shield Wu from the barbarian onslaught. He would meet fire with fire, deception with deception, until the Shu were either subjugated or appeased. He glanced again at the maps, at the jagged border separating Wu from Shu territory. It was more than just a line on parchment, it was a symbol of the tenuous balance between peace and war, between civilization and barbarity. It was a line that he, as general of the Wu army, was now pledged to defend. He would not falter. Knowing the enemy. Lamplight danced across Sun Izu's features, deepening the etched lines of worry around his eyes. The governance of Wu pressed upon him, a palpable weight accompanying each breath. Before him stood Wei, a figure of restrained power, his gaze firm. The map stretched between them on the table, alive with the specter of Shu barbarian incursions. Wei, Sun Izu began, his voice a low resonance, the Duke has placed Wu's fate in my hands. Yet, strategy unguided by insight is mere stumbling, and valor, wasted motion. He tapped a thick finger on a section of the map detailing the Whispering Woods, a sprawling, perilous borderland to Wu's north. The Shu hold dominion over these woods. We must pierce their veil of secrecy. Wei inclined his head, jaw set. General, my scouts probe the edges, charting familiar raid routes. But the heart of the woods, that remains a mystery, a green enigma. Precisely, Sun Tzu countered, his gaze sharp as a honed blade. I require more than paths, Wei. I need to feel their pulse, discern their cadence, exploit their vulnerabilities. He rose, pacing with hands clasped behind him. Note their advances, their numbers, their armaments. But delve deeper, Wei. Comprehend their methods. How do they stalk their prey? How do they share information amidst that dense foliage? Where lies the thread of their supplies? And above all, gauge their spirit. Wei's brow furrowed slightly. Spirit, General. They are barbarians, driven by nothing more than bloodlust and pillage. Sun Tzu halted, fixing Wei with an intense stare. Never discount your adversary, Wei. Even the most brutal warrior harbors a breaking point. What ignites their fury? What haunts their dreams? Do they fight for a cause, or merely from desperation? Grasp these truths, and you wield a weapon far sharper than any steel. He paused, his voice softening. To know the enemy is to win half the battle. To know oneself, that completes the victory. Wei straightened, a spark of resolution kindling in his eyes. I understand, General. I shall infiltrate their defenses, unravel their schemes, and bring back the knowledge you seek. The undertaking, however, is fraught with peril. Danger is war's constant shadow, Wei. Choose your eyes and ears with care. Select the quiet ones, the keen observers, those who can melt into the gloom and return with whispers of truth. Sun Tzu returned to the table, picking up a finely crafted wooden bird. He offered it to Wei. This belonged to my grandfather. He believed it encouraged a bird's-eye view, a broader perspective. Carry it with you. Let it serve as a reminder to watch, to analyze, to comprehend. Wei accepted the carving with respect. I shall not fail you, General. Sun Tzu watched Wei depart, disappearing into the teeming camp. He sighed, the weight of command settling more heavily upon him. Sending men toward potential doom remained a necessary evil, a somber calculation inherent to war. He could only pray Wei returned, bearing knowledge and, more importantly, his life. Later, as twilight painted the camp in hues of gray and purple, Sun Tzu wandered along the edge of the training grounds. The Duke's former concubines, now transformed into disciplined soldiers, executed drills with unwavering precision. He observed their movements under the sergeant's watchful eyes, their faces devoid of softness. The initial resistance, the tears, the desperate pleas, still echoed in his mind. He had been forced to dismantle them, to strip away their illusions of comfort, and hammer them into weapons. Was this justifiable? Could enduring peace truly be built upon such brutal foundations? The questions tormented him relentlessly. His methods sparked controversy, even among his own officers. Many viewed the harsh discipline, the seemingly random punishments, as excessive cruelty. Yet, Sun Tzu knew that an undisciplined force crumbled under pressure. He had witnessed the catastrophic results of complacency and weakness. Discipline wasn't about inflicting pain, it was about ensuring survival. It was about molding individual soldiers into a unified entity, capable of withstanding unbearable strain. It was about forging a shared purpose, a bond stronger than personal fear or longing. Still, he couldn't escape the gnawing suspicion that he walked a treacherous path, that the very means he employed to achieve peace threatened to corrode his soul. He yearned for his former simplicity, the tranquility of scrolls and quiet gardens. That life, however, was lost, consumed by the brutal reality of conflict. He was a general now, Wu's protector, compelled to fulfill his obligation, even at the cost of his own serenity. As he continued his solitary pacing, his thoughts spiraled inward. He had tasked Wei with self-knowledge, but did he himself possess it? He recognized his strengths, his strategic acumen, his unyielding resolve, his ability to distill order from chaos. But he also understood his weaknesses, his impatience, his leaning toward ruthlessness, his struggle to reconcile his ideals with war's grim realities. He embodied a paradox, a warrior desiring peace, a scholar wielding a sword. A man torn between duty and conscience, forever grappling with the moral ambiguities of his chosen path. Yet, he couldn't afford to waver. Wu's future hinged on his ability to master himself, to leverage his strengths and mitigate his flaws. Halting, he gazed at the distant stars, their cold light offering scant comfort amidst the vast darkness. He was just one man, standing as a bulwark against the surge of barbarism. But he was also Sun Izu, the strategist, the master of war. He would not yield. He would harness every available tool, every fragment of his knowledge and skill, to defend Wu and establish lasting peace, even if the path led through hellfire. He had to maintain his self-awareness, his understanding of his limitations, lest he transform into the very monster he sought to vanquish. The price of peace, he knew, was often paid with pieces of the soul. The art of deception. The training grounds, once a pristine field, now resembled a churned-up mire after a tempest of hooves and sweat. Mud plastered every surface, clinging to their boots, fouling their weapons, staining the edges of their tunics. Yet, the warriors of Wu stood firm, chests laboring, their gaze unwavering on Sun Izu. He observed them with the keen focus of a hunting eagle. The relentless drills, the arduous marches, the unconventional regimens, all were transforming them from a disparate collection of farmers and artisans into something far more formidable. They were becoming a legion. Today, Sun Izu's voice, amplified by the natural bowl of the surrounding hills, sliced through the still morning air. We will delve into the subtleties of misdirection. The very linchpin upon which triumph rests. A ripple of consternation spread through the ranks. Deception. It felt underhanded, bordering on cowardice. Sun Izu had anticipated this discomfort. He raised a hand, silencing their burgeoning dissent. Many foolishly believe war to be a simple equation of strength, a contest of brute force. They are sorely mistaken. War is an intricate dance of wits, a game of perceptions, a theater of illusions. He paused, allowing his words to resonate. The most potent army is not necessarily the one capable of delivering the most devastating blow, but the one that can successfully convince its adversary of its own weakness. He gestured toward a line of crudely fashioned straw effigies positioned along the field's edge. Each was adorned with rudimentary armor and wielded a roughly painted shield, intended to represent soldiers from Shu. These, he declared, represent our foe. Or, more accurately, what they believe we perceive them to be. A fleeting, almost unsettling smile flickered across his face. Today, we disabuse them of that notion. Wei, ever the attentive lieutenant, stepped forward bearing a cluster of vibrant pennants. Scarlet, cerulean, gold, they fluttered in the breeze like caged birds eager for flight. General, Wei reported, presenting the flags. Ready as ordered. Sun Izu selected the crimson banner. This, he announced, raising it high, symbolizes our vanguard, the core of our fighting strength. How should we employ it? His gaze swept across the assembly, soliciting a response. A young recruit, barely past boyhood, spoke tentatively. Display it prominently, General. To flaunt our power. Sun Izu nodded deliberately. Precisely. Exactly what the enemy anticipates. He lowered the flag. Now, observe. He directed a small contingent of soldiers, barely 20 strong, to bear the crimson flag and advance boldly toward the straw figures, shouting battle cries and brandishing their arms. They moved with exaggerated bravado, projecting an aura of irresistible might. As they approached the effigies, Sun Izu gave the prearranged signal. The flag-bearers immediately about-faced and bolted, scattering in wild disarray, leaving their comrades to be symbolically overrun by the unmoving enemy. A wave of groans swept through the watching troops. The charade felt absurd, almost shameful. What conclusions would the enemy draw? Sun Izu demanded, his tone sharpened. This time, a seasoned veteran stepped forward. Confusion, General. They'd presume us easily shattered, lacking resolve. Precisely. Sun Izu affirmed. But what if, concealed amongst the fleeing ranks, lurked our archers? What if, as the enemy surges forward, blinded by their presumed triumph, they are greeted by a storm of arrows? He indicated a hidden cadre of archers, bows already taut. At his command, they unleashed a barrage of arrows, piercing the straw figures with deadly precision. A collective gasp rippled through the ranks. The initial embarrassment had dissolved, replaced by a burgeoning comprehension. It wasn't about sheer brawn, it was about crafting openings, exploiting vulnerabilities, and defying expectations. Sun Tzu proceeded to illustrate other deceptive strategies. He demonstrated the creation of false trails, scattering discarded equipment and trampling vegetation to feign a retreat, only to spring an ambush on the pursuing enemy. He instructed them in the use of signal fires to propagate misinformation, exaggerating troop numbers or simulating distress to lure the enemy into carefully prepared traps. He emphasized the paramount importance of disguise, of merging with the environment, of becoming spectral until the moment of assault. The afternoon waned, the sun a burning eye in the sky. The soldiers, initially doubtful, now devoured Sun Tzu's every utterance. They rehearsed the techniques, faltering at first, then gradually mastering the craft of misdirection. Wei, observing the exercise, approached Sun Tzu. "General," he murmured, "their progress is rapid. Yet, some remain unconvinced. They consider these tactics beneath them." Sun Tzu sighed inwardly. He had anticipated this resistance. The notion of honorable combat, of facing the enemy head-on, was woven deeply into the fabric of their tradition. "Honor," he responded, his voice subdued, "is a luxury we can ill afford. We fight for survival, for the sanctity of our homes, for the destiny of Wu. If guile can preserve lives, if it can curtail the conflict and hasten our path to peace, then it is not dishonorable, but essential." His gaze swept across the training grounds, taking in the soldiers diligently refining their deceptions. He saw not merely fighters, but fathers, husbands, sons, all fighting for something larger than themselves. "The true disgrace," he continued, "lies in squandering their lives needlessly, in clinging to antiquated notions of warfare that lead inevitably to ruin and death." He paused, contemplating his own conviction. Was he truly secure in his beliefs? The boundary between pragmatism and ruthlessness was often indistinct, and he feared he was nearing the latter. The price of tranquility, he was starting to comprehend, was far steeper than he had initially estimated. As twilight descended, draping the training grounds in elongated shadows, Sun Tzu dismissed the troops. They scattered, weary yet invigorated, minds teeming with newfound strategies and ploys. Sun Tzu lingered behind, alone amidst the scarred landscape. He felt the crushing weight of his responsibility, the mantle of leadership heavy upon his shoulders. He was steering these men down an uncharted path, demanding they embrace methods that challenged their core beliefs of valor and integrity. He lifted his gaze to the star-speckled canvas above, seeking solace, guidance. He recognized that the looming war against Shu would be unprecedented for Wu. It would demand not only prowess and discipline but also cunning, artifice, and a willingness to pursue victory at any cost. And he, Sun Tzu, was burdened with guiding them. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and steeled himself for the trials ahead. The art of deception, he understood, extended beyond simply misleading the adversary. It was about deceiving himself, about convincing himself that the sacrifices he was demanding were justified, that the ends truly sanctified the means. Yet, a persistent doubt lingered, a whisper in the recesses of his mind. What if he was deluded? What if, in his quest for peace, he was leading Wu toward an abyss of irreversible darkness? Unconventional warfare. The dew-kissed forest floor muffled the whisper of approaching feet. Sun Tzu followed the silent retreat of Captain Li's Wu squad into the pine-choked woods. They rehearsed the ambush, a strategy so at odds with Wu's time-honored combat doctrines that it bordered on heresy. He tasked them with conjuring the image of their foes, Shu soldiers marching along a mountain pass, their arrogance a palpable thing. He wanted them to practically taste the enemy's fear, imagine the tremor of the ground beneath their unsuspecting sandals. They had to become the woods themselves, lethally silent, awaiting the opportune instant. A disturbed sunbeam betrayed their position, then nothing. Too slow, too clumsy. Sun Tzu gestured for Li to return. "Surprise transcends mere concealment, Captain," he murmured. "It's about defying expectation. Your movements lack grace. Picture a tiger stalking, it doesn't trumpet its arrival with snapping twigs. It flows, a liquid shadow conforming to the earth, until the final, decisive pounce." Li, a soldier forged in open battle, bristled. "But General, such methods, they reek of dishonor. We are Wu warriors, not cutthroats slinking in the undergrowth." Sun Tzu suppressed a sigh. This was the perennial struggle, battling deeply rooted convention. Honor is a burden we can ill afford if it spells defeat. Our sacred duty is the safety of our people, the sanctity of our homes. If guile is the key to triumph, we must wield it, however distasteful. What is more honorable, a glorious, pointless death, or a life spent defending those we love? Li paused, weighing the words. I understand, General, he assented, though a stubborn reluctance lingered in his voice. Good. Again. Move now as wraiths, become one with the timber. And remember, Sun Tzu's gaze sharpened, a false withdrawal only works if the enemy wholeheartedly believes it. Give them a reason to pursue. The squad melted back into the trees, their movements palpably smoother this time. Sun Tzu watched, hawk-eyed, as they honed their craft. The sun arced higher, painting long shadows across the training grounds. Later, on a parched, open plain, another ensemble of warriors practiced the art of the feigned retreat. Sun Tzu had commanded them to engage, inflict initial damage, then flee. Not a panicked rout, mind you, but a calculated, deliberate ruse to lure the enemy into a carefully prepared trap. He scrutinized their movements, shields raised against phantom arrows, spears darting forward before they spun and ran. It was a disorienting dance, a deceiving ballet of misdirection. The problem, their faces. He saw shame etched in every line, the discomfort of turning their backs on a perceived foe. They telegraphed defeat, a message they could not afford to send. Sun Tzu approached, his boots thudding on the sun-baked earth. Halt! His voice cracked like a whip. You flee like craven curs, not warriors. A feigned retreat isn't born of terror, but forged as a weapon. You aren't running from the enemy, you are leading them to slaughter. Project vulnerability, but be prepared to pounce at a moment's notice. He fixed his gaze on a young soldier, barely past boyhood, whose face mirrored dejection. You. What emotions consume you when you turn your back? The boy stammered, shame, General. Fear. Precisely. And that is the bait they will seize. You must cloak those emotions. Exude confidence, even in flight. Envision yourselves as hunters drawing a wild boar into a pit. You remain in command, though appearing to run. Sun Tzu demonstrated, moving with deceptive agility. He showed them how to hold eye contact, feign exhaustion while remaining vigilant, craft the illusion of weakness while concealing their strength. The key, he emphasized, is to sculpt their perception. Make them embrace the belief you want them to hold. Offer them a taste of victory before you tear it away. As dusk painted the plain in hues of gold, Sun Tzu observed the warriors practicing anew, their movements now imbued with a sense of purpose. He witnessed the change in their bearing, the dawning comprehension of the tactic's devastating potential. He moved on to oversee another company drilling the swift flanking maneuver, a technique demanding exceptional coordination and discipline. The intent was to engage the enemy in a frontal assault while a detached force swept around to strike their flank or rear, sowing discord and chaos. This tactic presented extreme difficulties, hinging on precise timing and flawless communication. A single misstep, a moment of hesitation, could unravel the entire maneuver, leaving the flanking force exposed to annihilation. Sun Tzu watched, their movements synchronized as clockwork. They flowed like a single, deadly organism, their spears glinting, their shields an impenetrable barrier. Yet, something remained missing. He approached, his eyes searching their faces. You move with precision, devoid of passion, he stated. You are automatons, executing orders without grasping their spirit. A flanking maneuver transcends merely moving from position A to position B. It's about exploiting the chinks in the enemy's armor, about striking at their hidden vulnerabilities, about orchestrating bedlam. He paused, letting his words resonate. You must internalize the terrain, the enemy's formations, their anticipated reactions. You must predict their moves and devise suitable counters. Only then can you wield the flanking maneuver with overwhelming efficacy. Sun Tzu devoted the remaining evening coaching the warriors, imparting the subtle nuances of the flanking maneuver. He underscored the critical importance of communication, the necessity of adapting to shifting circumstances, and the vital requirement of unwavering focus. As darkness cloaked the training ground, Sun Tzu stood alone, watching the final warriors disperse. He felt pleased by their progress. They were learning, evolving, and transforming into a force capable of unconventional warfare. Yet, a nagging doubt persisted. He recognized that these tactics were necessary, essential to survival. But he also understood that they extracted a price, the price of honor, of tradition, of the very essence of being a warrior. He wondered if he was leading them onto a treacherous path, one that would ultimately corrupt them, transforming them into something less than themselves. He wondered if peace came at too great a cost. Whispers of doubt. The jade pendant, cool against Duke Guang's skin, did little to soothe his mounting apprehension. He worried it between his fingers, the polished surface offering no purchase. The training drills, once a captivating novelty, now felt like a spiraling disarray. Sun Tzu's recruits moved with an unsettling litheness, a perplexing ballet of calculated retreats and swift offensives that bordered on the unseemly. A true warrior stood firm, meeting the enemy head-on, not with this cunning. General Zhao, a man carved from granite, stood rigidly before the Duke, his expression a mask of disapproval. The pavilion air thrummed with stifled dissent. Chen, the royal advisor, lingered a step behind Zhao, his thin mouth a testament to his habitual disdain. "Your Grace," Zhao's voice resonated like a gong, vibrating through the space. "With the deepest respect, I must voice my unease. This General Sun Tzu, his methods are unconventional, to say the least." Guang sighed, a wisp of sound lost in the tension. "Unconventional is precisely what I sought, Zhao. The Shu are predictable. We require an advantage, something they won't expect. Predictability is the cornerstone of honor, Your Grace. It distinguishes us from mere savages. This, dodging and concealing, it is not warfare, but base treachery." Zhao's fists clenched, knuckles white. "General Zhao exaggerates, perhaps," Chen inserted, his voice like a sharpened reed. "Sun Tzu's strategies display potential, certainly. However." He paused, his gaze darting nervously toward the Duke. "There are reservations." Guang rubbed his temples, seeking to alleviate the growing ache. "Reservations? Elaborate." Zhao seized the opening. "He has never commanded a legion in earnest, Your Grace. Never tasted the crucible of battle. His knowledge is gleaned from texts, from time-worn scrolls. But war is not ink and parchment, it is blood and bone. How can a man untouched by carnage lead our valiant soldiers?" A flicker of steel hardened the Duke's gaze. "He impressed me with his insight, his capacity to dissect a situation and pinpoint vulnerabilities. Insight is one thing, Your Grace. Implementation, quite another. He speaks of ambuscades, of artful withdrawals. Such maneuvers demand seasoned soldiers, men attuned to precision and timing. To entrust these complex operations to green recruits, it is an invitation to calamity." Scorn laced Zhao's booming voice. Chen cleared his throat, a nervous tick. The men appear bewildered. Accustomed to direct command and explicit objectives, this adaptability feels alien to them. Whispers reach my ears, Your Grace. Doubts are taking root. The whispers. Those were the seeds of unease that truly troubled Guang. He had felt a surge of hope, a conviction that Sun Tzu held the key to victory. But doubt, like a creeping frost, threatened to wither that nascent optimism. He glanced toward the training field. Sun Tzu, a diminutive, isolated figure amidst the controlled chaos, dispensed instructions with unwavering composure. Was it true confidence, or reckless faith? His strategies carry inherent risks, Chen persisted, pressing his advantage. Should they falter, the consequences could be devastating. Zhao offered a vigorous nod. "Devastating, Your Grace. Lives squandered, territory exposed. And all because we placed our trust in a pedant." Guang rose, the jade pendant swinging against his chest. He walked towards the pavilion's edge, his gaze sweeping across the practice field. The setting sun painted the scene in strokes of fire, long shadows stretching across the meadow. The soldiers moved like marionettes on strings, their faces tight with apprehension, their movements lacking conviction. Was Zhao right? Had he been seduced by Sun Tzu's silver tongue, by the mirage of a bloodless victory? "I will observe the drills tomorrow," Guang declared, his voice devoid of inflection. "I will assess Sun Tzu's progress, and his methods firsthand." Zhao bowed low. "As Your Grace commands. I trust your wisdom will prevail." Chen offered a more restrained bow, a glint of premature triumph in his eyes. The whispers, Guang sensed, were growing louder, forming a chorus of apprehension. And he, the Duke, was beginning to conduct it. That night, sleep proved a fickle companion. Guang wrestled with his thoughts, the day's events replaying in an endless loop behind his eyelids. He saw the carefully planned retreats devolve into panicked flights, the ambushes sprung too late, the flanking maneuvers crumbling into disarray. He envisioned the advancing Shu legions, their serpent banners snapping in the wind, their faces grim with purpose. He saw his own warriors fall, their blood staining the parched earth, their dying cries echoing across the battlefield. He threw off the bed covers, his skin clammy with perspiration. He walked to the window, peering out at the moon-drenched landscape. Silence enveloped the palace grounds, broken only by the whisper of leaves in the breeze. A profound unease settled upon him, a cold premonition of disaster. He had placed his faith in Sun Izu, a man who promised triumph through guile. But what if the true deception lay within himself? What if he had been beguiled by a fraud, a man who could discuss strategy but knew nothing of its brutal execution? He thought of Zhao, the seasoned warrior, the man who had witnessed the horrors of battle firsthand. He thought of Chen, the steadfast advisor, the man who had always placed the kingdom's well-being above all else. They harbored doubts about Sun Izu, and their skepticism was beginning to infect him. He returned to bed, but peace remained elusive. The whispers intensified, a discordant choir echoing in his mind. He had erred, of that he was now certain. He had entrusted the fate of his kingdom to the wrong hands. The following morning, Guang arrived at the training ground accompanied by his retinue of guards and advisors. Zhao and Qin flanked him, their faces unreadable, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. The assembled soldiers looked wan, their movements listless. The atmosphere was thick with foreboding. Sun Izu approached, his face serene, his eyes unwavering. He bowed with respect. "Your Grace," he said, his voice clear and strong. "We are prepared to demonstrate our progress." Guang offered a curt nod. "Begin." Sun Izu gestured to his lieutenants, and the exercise commenced. The troops moved with renewed purpose, their movements exhibiting greater fluidity, their timing more precise. The staged retreats possessed a convincing air of panic, the ambushes were executed with surprising alacrity, the flanking maneuvers unfolded with remarkable synchronization. But Guang's gaze remained fixed on Sun Izu. He studied the way he directed his forces, the way he anticipated their actions, the way he corrected their errors. He saw not merely a theorist, but a leader, a strategist, a man who possessed an innate understanding of the art of war. And yet, the whispers lingered. He could still hear Zhao's booming voice questioning Sun Tzu's lack of practical experience. He could still see Chen's skeptical expression. He could still feel the disquiet that had haunted him throughout the night. As the drill concluded, Sun Izu approached the Duke, his expression hopeful. "Well, General?" Guang asked, his voice carefully measured. "What is your assessment?" Sun Izu smiled, a fleeting expression. "The men are learning, Your Grace. They are beginning to grasp the principles of deception, of adaptability, of exploiting the foe's weaknesses. We are not yet ready for war, but we are advancing." Guang nodded slowly. "Advancing. But is it sufficient?" Sun Tzu's smile faltered. "We will be prepared, Your Grace. I give you my word." Guang locked eyes with him, searching for any hint of uncertainty or hesitation. But he found only resolution, only unwavering belief. He sighed, the sound barely audible. The whispers persisted, but their volume had diminished. "Very well, General," Guang said, his voice firm. "Continue your training. But understand this, the destiny of my kingdom rests upon your shoulders. Do not disappoint me." Sun Izu bowed deeply. "I will not, Your Grace." As Guang turned to depart, he felt Zhao's gaze boring into his back. He knew the general remained unconvinced, still regarded Sun Izu as a charlatan. But Guang had made his choice. He would continue to place his trust in Sun Izu, at least for now. He had no other option. The alternative was too dreadful to contemplate. The whispers, however, persisted, a constant reminder of the gamble he was taking, the risk he had embraced. He was beginning to realize that the price of peace could be far steeper than he had ever imagined. Calm amidst chaos. Dust devils danced across the training grounds, stirred by the soldiers' tireless practice. Sun Izu remained motionless, a figure seemingly sculpted from stone amidst the swirling grit. His penetrating stare tracked the Wu warriors as they practiced the serpent formation, their movements a study in controlled aggression. Though the sun blazed, turning their armor into illusory pools of light, they persevered, driven by his unspoken authority. Scout Captain Wei approached, his expression troubled, the grime of travel etched into his tunic. His movements possessed a predator's stealth, a skill honed through countless hours in the shadows. "General," Wei's voice was a bare murmur against the metallic symphony of training. Dissension festers within the ranks. Zhao publicly questions your tactics, branding them as dishonorable and ineffective. He's planting seeds of unease. Sun Izu didn't react, his focus unwavering as he observed a young soldier struggling to maintain his place in the drill. Let him, he responded, his tone even, betraying no emotion. Wei shuffled his feet. It transcends mere rhetoric, General. Whispers of insubordination circulate among the officers. They deem your methods unworthy, a stain on Wu's martial pride. Finally, Sun Tzu turned, his gaze meeting Wei's. His eyes held not anger, but a fathomless composure. Honor is a luxury we can ill afford. Our purpose is victory. The safeguarding of Wu. Tell me, Wei, does a farmer fret over the honor of the plow when he breaks the earth? He seeks sustenance, provision. We are tillers of war, Wei. Our harvest is peace. Wei lowered his head, absorbing the general's rationale. He had witnessed Sun Tzu's strategic genius firsthand, the uncanny ability to anticipate and exploit vulnerabilities. Still, he understood the deeply ingrained traditions of Wu, the veneration of honorable combat. The men are conflicted, General. They are bred to confront enemies directly, not to lurk in the shadows, employing deceit. Then we shall mold them into something more, Sun Tzu declared, turning back to the field. We will teach them survival. We will teach them triumph. Issue an order to the quartermasters, reduce rations by 1/10. Wei's eyebrows shot up in surprise. General. Are you certain? Morale is already fragile. An army may travel on its belly, but it truly fights on its resolve. A hungry soldier is a sharp soldier. He comprehends the stakes. He grasps the necessity of conservation, of decisive action. It will also sift out the chaff, those lacking the fortitude to endure hardship. Wei paused, then nodded, acquiescing. He dared not argue. Sun Tzu's mind worked with intricate precision, a complex engine of calculation. And Wei, Sun Tzu continued, his tone softening slightly, keep your ears to the ground. I need to know every word Zhao utters, every action he takes. But do not engage him. Not yet. Wei bowed and melted back into the controlled chaos of the training grounds. Sun Tzu watched him depart, his expression inscrutable. He understood that Zhao's descent was a smoldering ember, threatening to engulf the Wu army's precarious unity. But he also knew that fire could be contained, directed, even used to temper stronger steel. He moved toward the heart of the field, his presence immediately commanding the soldiers' attention. The metallic clangor died down, replaced by the rasping breaths of exhausted men. Serpent formation. Sun Tzu's voice cleaved through the air with sharp authority. Again. Faster. More fluid. Conjure the enemy before you. Sense their fear. Reek of their desperation. Grant them no respite. He drove them remorselessly, demanding perfection. He drilled them in ambushes, feints, and strategic withdrawals. He taught them how to leverage the terrain, to become one with the shadows, to disappear into the landscape. He demonstrated how to exploit their foes' weaknesses, how to weaponize their strengths. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting long shadows across the parched earth, Sun Tzu finally signaled a halt. The soldiers collapsed, their bodies slick with sweat, their muscles throbbing in protest. Rest, Sun Tzu instructed, his tone surprisingly mild. Tomorrow, we resume. He turned and left, leaving the men to their deserved rest. He sought neither their gratitude nor their validation. He demanded only their obedience. Later that evening, as the camp settled into an uneasy tranquility, Sun Tzu sat alone in his tent, consumed by a map of the borderlands. The flickering candlelight cast dancing silhouettes on his face, accentuating the deep furrows etched by years of conflict and strategy. The barbarian incursions had grown more brazen, more frequent, a deliberate testing of Wu's resolve. Sun Tzu knew a full-blown invasion loomed. He had to be prepared. His finger traced the mountain passes, scrutinizing the topography, seeking the ideal ambush location. He contemplated the enemy's probable path, their strengths, their vulnerabilities. He visualized their maneuvers, their strategies, their fears. A soft tap at the tent flap interrupted him. Enter, he commanded, without looking up. Wei entered, bearing a steaming cup of tea. He placed it on the small table. General, Wei began, his voice laced with hesitation. I bring further news from the camp. Zhao persists in his opposition. He has drawn a small cabal of officers who share his reservations. They intend to confront you. Sun Tzu raised his gaze, his eyes now like chips of flint. Confront me? With what? Steel? Or words? Words, General. But words can be more lethal than blades. They can corrode morale, undermine command, spark mutiny. Sun Izu sipped his tea, his composure unyielding. Let them come, he said, unwavering. I will be here. Wei studied him, his face etched with apprehension. General, perhaps precautions are warranted. Bolster your guard, relocate to a safer place. Sun Izu shook his head. No. I will not hide. I will not shrink. I will face them. I will answer their questions. I will prove that my methods offer the sole path to Wu's survival. He returned to his map, his mind already churning, formulating his response. He knew this reckoning was inevitable. A trial of his leadership, a crucible of fire. He had to maintain his calm and be decisive. The night deepened, and the camp grew still. Only the wavering light in Sun Izu's tent hinted at the relentless activity within. He persisted in his study of the maps, his mind a maelstrom of strategy and calculation. He was a commander preparing for battle, not against an external foe, but against the insidious forces of doubt and dissent. The price of peace, he knew, often exceeded the cost of war. And he stood ready to pay, whatever the toll. He reviewed his troop placements, committed supply lines to memory, and mentally rehearsed his battle plans. The details blurred, yet he held firm to his vision, picturing its execution with unwavering clarity. He thought of his home, his kin, his sworn oath to Wu. The burden of responsibility weighed heavily, but he remained resolute. He was Sun Izu, and he would not yield. He would find a way to guide Wu to victory, even at the cost of everything he possessed. The barbarian raid. Dust devils danced, kicked up not by the breeze, but by the frantic gallop of Scout Captain Wei's mount as he slid to a jarring stop before Sun Izu's command tent. The scout, usually a paragon of self-control, was gasping, his face streaked with dirt and a crimson trickle stemming from a cut above his brow. General Sun, he rasped, almost unintelligible. The northern tribes, they've raided. A village just north of Willow Creek. Reduced to ash. Everyone, either slaughtered or abducted. A disturbed ripple went through the assembled officers. Predictably, Zhao pressed forward, his face a cold canvas of dark satisfaction. Perhaps, he drawled, his tone sharp with thinly veiled scorn, if our men weren't on starvation rations and trained like performing monkeys, we might have had sufficient scouting parties. Foresight, General. Remember foresight. Sun Izu remained unmoved, his gaze locked on Wei. The scout's report painted a chilling tableau, one that screamed for immediate response, not petty bickering. A raised hand cut off Zhao mid-sentence. Captain Wei, the details. Wei swallowed convulsively, regaining his bearings. The assault was lightning fast, merciless. They struck at dawn, a force numbering perhaps 200. Led by AcCTUALLY, the scourge of the north. They plundered everything. Stock, supplies, people, his voice faltered, unable to articulate further. AcCTUALLY. The name hung heavy in the air, a tangible menace. Sun Izu had studied the chieftain's brutal methods. He was a virtuoso of quick strikes, exploiting undefended settlements, vanishing back into the wilds before any organized resistance could materialize. A head-on collision was AcCTUALLY's desire, a bloody free-for-all where his warriors' savagery trumped disciplined ranks. Such a boon Sun Izu would deny him. The topography around Willow Creek, Sun Izu inquired, his voice a calm counterpoint to the rising anxiety. Describe it. Wei, ever the keen observer, pivoted seamlessly. The village sits on a slight elevation, encircled by open fields. To the west, a narrow cleft cleaves the hills, offering passage to the barbarian territories. The gorge is densely overgrown, difficult to navigate swiftly, but providing ample concealment. Sun Izu inclined his head, a plan solidifying. A risky gamble, but one of potential consequence. Summon the captains. Instantly. Within moments, the war tent pulsed with officers, their expressions a mixed bag of trepidation and anticipation. Sun Izu dispensed with preamble. AcCTUALLY has shown his hand. He believes he's caught us napping. We will disabuse him of that notion. We will not pursue him into his own lands. We will bait him into a trap. He unfurled a map of the area, indicating Willow Creek and the gorge to the west. AcCTUALLY will anticipate a direct pursuit, a quest for vengeance. We will feign compliance. Zhao, you will take 100 soldiers and pursue the raiders. Reveal yourselves. Pester their rear guard, but avoid a full-blown engagement. Drive them into the gorge. Zhao's gaze sharpened. And what of the rest of us, General? Are we to simply stand aside while he escapes? Patience, Captain Zhao, Sun Tzu countered, a thread of steel in his tone. The bulk of the army will be poised in ambush. The gorge constricts significantly midway. We will position archers on the heights flanking the passage. Once Targetai is fully committed, we will spring the snare. A low murmur of approval circulated throughout the tent, even from those previously skeptical of Sun Tzu's approach. The plan was daring, hinging on misdirection and impeccable timing. Yet it presented the opportunity to cripple Targetai's strength and broadcast a clear message that Wu would brook no such incursions. Captainly, Sun Tzu proceeded, addressing the commander of the archers. Position your men with utmost care. Obscure them thoroughly. I want no sound, no movement until my signal. And Captain Bai, you will take your cavalry squadron and seal off the eastern mouth of the gorge. Ensure complete containment. The commands were issued with brisk precision. Sun Tzu's composure concealed the gravity of the situation, imbuing his officers with resolve. Even Zhao appeared appeased, eager for a chance to prove his mettle. As the officers departed to marshal their forces, Sun Tzu turned to Wei. Captain, I require you to scout ahead. Ascertain Targetai's precise location, his pace, his disposition. And crucially, his state of mind. Is he suspicious? Does he harbor any inkling of a ruse? Wei nodded somberly. I will depart at once, General. He paused, then added, the villagers, what befell them? It was horrific. Sun Tzu met his gaze, his expression inscrutable. War is horrific, Captain. But it is our sworn duty to safeguard our people, even if it demands grim choices. As Wei left, Sun Tzu felt the familiar weight descend. The weight of authority, the weight of accountability, the crushing understanding that his decisions held the power of life and death for so many. He exited the tent and surveyed the active camp. Soldiers readied themselves for battle, sharpening their blades, attending to their steeds, their faces etched with determination. He glimpsed fear in some eyes, yet also a spark of hope. Hope that he, Sun Tzu, could guide them to victory. He knew triumph hinged not only on strategy and technique, but also on deciphering the enemy, anticipating his initiatives, and exploiting his vulnerabilities. Targetai was a barbaric combatant, yet also conceited, recklessly self-assured. He saw himself as untouchable. That hubris would be his undoing. The sun began its descent, painting long shadows across the training grounds. Sun Tzu stood solitary, his gaze fixed on the horizon, lost in contemplation. He could almost sense Targetai's looming presence, the barbarian chieftain, riding toward him, a tempest of devastation in his wake. And he understood that the destiny of Wu, the lives of his countrymen, rested solely on his shoulders. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and readied himself to weather the storm. The cost of tranquility, he knew, was often blood. And he was willing to meet that cost, should the need arise. As night deepened, Zhao's detachment clashed with Targetai's rearguard. The engagement was brief but fierce, a hail of arrows and ringing steel. Zhao's troops fought bravely, but their numbers were insufficient and they were soon compelled to fall back, drawing the barbarians deeper into the gorge. Sun Tzu, concealed with the main force in the hills overlooking the passage, received notification of the skirmish. He maintained his composure, his face unreadable. Everything was unfolding as predicted. Hours slipped by. The moon ascended in the sky, bathing the landscape in an eerie luminescence. The air hung still and silent, punctuated only by the occasional trill of a cricket. The tension in the ranks was a palpable force. Every soldier was aware that the decisive moment was fast approaching. Finally, Wei returned, his horse drenched in sweat. He dismounted and hurried to Sun Tzu's side. General, he whispered, Targetai is entering the gorge. He is riding at the vanguard of his forces, self-assured, arrogant. He suspects nothing. Sun Tzu nodded slowly. The trap was poised. Now it was time to trigger it. He lifted his hand, signaling captainly. The archers braced themselves, bows drawn, arrows aimed. As Targetai and his warriors advanced deeper into the gorge, the walls on either side seemed to constrict around them. The shadows deepened, the silence grew oppressive. Even the barbarians, hardened by years of raiding and pillaging, began to feel a prickle of unease. Suddenly, a lone arrow sliced through the air, followed by a thunderous volley. Hundreds of arrows cascaded down upon the barbarians, felling them like stalks of grain under a blade. The gorge transformed into a slaughterhouse, echoing with the shrieks of the dying and the pounding of hooves. Targetai, utterly surprised, roared in defiance, spurring his men forward. But there was no escape. The archers continued their relentless barrage, and Captain Bai's cavalry sealed off the eastern entrance to the gorge, eliminating any chance of retreat. The battle surged for hours, the barbarians fighting with frenzied desperation, but it was a futile struggle. Confined within the narrow defile, they were sitting targets for the Wu archers. By dawn, the gorge was carpeted with corpses, the earth saturated with blood. Targetai, miraculously still living, fought with the ferocity of a trapped beast, his eyes burning with unquenchable rage. But he was surrounded, outnumbered, and drained. Finally, he was felled by a storm of arrows, his body riddled with mortal wounds. As the sun crested the horizon, casting its golden light upon the carnage, Sun Izu surveyed the scene. The battle was concluded. The barbarians had been decimated. But the triumph had come at a heavy price. Many Wu soldiers had also perished, their lives given to defend their home. He turned to Wei, his face solemn. Count the dead. Attend to the wounded. And prepare for the next conflict. For this is merely a prologue. The barbarians will be back. They will invariably return. And we must be ever vigilant, ready to confront them, repeatedly, until they grasp that we will not be subdued. The price of peace, he knew, was unending vigilance. And he stood ready to pay that price, however long it took. The mountain pass trap. The mountain air, heavy with the scent of resin and turned earth, clung to everything. Sun Izu surveyed the rugged panorama, the saw-toothed peaks tearing at the heavens. He touched the flaking bark of a fir, its perfume a counterpoint to the metallic edge of anticipation prickling his senses. All the accumulated strategies, the endless map studies, the weeks of grueling drills, the lifetime spent dissecting conflict, had led to this singular point. Wei, Sun Izu's voice, a sand-roughened murmur, barely cut through the wind's susurrus. The scout captain emerged from the shadows, his face a canvas of grime and exhaustion, yet his gaze burned with keen awareness. General. The barbarians. 2 hours, General. Targetai leads them personally, with a horde larger than we anticipated. They're burdened with spoils, eager for the warmth of their fires and safety of their camp. Wei's report was clipped, professional. He was the general's extended sight, having ventured into the barbarian domain to chart their movements and gauge their strength. His insights were priceless. Sun Izu gave a curt nod, his face a mask of composure. Excellent. They anticipate an effortless trek. Let us disabuse them of that notion, shall we? He addressed his assembled soldiers, his voice amplified, booming across the defile. Warriors of Wu. Today, we etch a new legend into our chronicles. Today, we stand as bulwarks of hearth and home, defenders of our very existence. The foe deems us feeble, cowed. Let us paint for them a vivid portrait of true terror. A wave of whispers rippled through the ranks, a blend of trepidation and steadfastness. These were men of the soil, craftsmen, individuals acquainted with tranquility. Now, fate had forged them into soldiers, embroiled in a merciless war against an implacable enemy. Yet, their loyalty to Duke Guang ran deep, as did their faith in Sun Izu's command, even when its reasoning eluded them. Sun Izu gestured towards the steep inclines flanking the pass. Archers, take the heights. Conceal yourselves with utmost care. Await my signal. Unleash your volleys when they're most exposed. He pointed to a constriction in the pass, where the cliffs pinched inward, forming a choke point. Spearmen. You will construct our bulwark here. Hold this defile against all comers. Yield not an inch. Let them crash against your shields as breakers against a steadfast coast. To a select group of swordsmen, he issued different instructions. You will remain cloaked amongst the boulders until the signal. Once the barbarians are fully entangled, strike from the rear, severing their retreat. The strategy possessed a Spartan elegance, a brutal efficiency. It squeezed every advantage from the landscape, transforming the narrow passage into a butcher's yard. It hinged on deception, coaxing the adversary into a false sense of security before unleashing the full might of Wu. As his men scrambled to their assigned positions, Sun Izu felt the familiar vice of responsibility tighten in his chest. He was consigning these brave souls to danger, demanding they wager their lives for a cause he held sacred. the burden weighed heavily. He moved along the line of spearmen, his eyes locking with theirs. He saw the tremor of fear, but also the fire of resolution. He witnessed the mettle of ordinary men called upon to perform extraordinary feats. Have faith in your training, he exhorted. Have faith in your brothers in arms. And have faith in me. We shall triumph. The sun began its descent, painting long, ominous strokes across the pass. The air sharpened, carrying the scent of evergreens intertwined with the faint, sharp scent of coming bloodshed. Sun Izu stood solitary, hand resting on the pommel of his sword, vigilant. Time stretched taut, each heartbeat an age. The only sounds were the exhalations of the wind and the slight tremble of leaves. Then, in the distance, it came. A faint vibration, steadily gathering volume. The cadence of approaching hooves, the clink of armor, the raucous cries of men. The barbarians were nearly upon them. Sun Izu inhaled deeply, mastering the frantic rhythm of his pulse. He briefly closed his eyes, picturing the impending clash. He envisioned the barbarians plunging into the pass, their features warped with avarice and bloodlust. He saw the archers release their arrows, a lethal rain plummeting from above. He saw the spearmen bracing themselves, a bastion of steel against the onslaught. And he saw the swordsmen ambushing from behind, shifting the balance of the fight. He snapped his eyes open, a hard resolve gleaming in their depths. Now, he breathed. Let the game begin. The vanguard of the barbarian raiding party materialized at the entrance to the defile, their eyes shining with greedy anticipation. A ragtag company, swathed in furs and cured hides, their faces daubed with crude markings. They brandished axes, scimitars, and javelins, their weapons reflecting the dying light. AcCTUALLY led the charge, his hulking form towering above the others. A merciless warrior, his face a roadmap of scars and weathered brutality, his eyes holding a chilling, calculating intelligence. He had led his men on countless pillaging expeditions, despoiling settlements and terrorizing the populace. He considered himself untouchable. Entering the pass, AcCTUALLY cast a sweeping glance across the terrain, searching for any telltale sign of peril. But he observed nothing of note. Only sheer mountains, craggy slopes, and the twisting trail ahead. He grinned, secure in the promise of yet another swift victory. Faster, he bellowed, spurring his men onward. The plunder awaits. The barbarians surged forward, their mounts pounding through the pass. They thirsted for the sanctuary of their camp, the celebration of triumph, the enjoyment of their ill-gotten gains. They took no notice of the shadows clinging to the heights, or the flash of metal hidden amongst the boulders. Reaching the most constricted area of the passage, Sun Izu lifted his hand. He lingered for a heartbeat, savoring the instant. Then, he brought his hand down decisively, his command clear and unmistakable. Now, he roared. The pass became a maelstrom. From the high ground, a storm of arrows descended upon the barbarians, each projectile finding its target with deadly precision. Horses shrieked and collapsed, men howled in agony and alarm. The barbarians were taken utterly unaware, their formation dissolving into chaos. The spearmen surged forward, their shields interlocked, forming an unyielding barrier. They collided with the barbarian charge head-on, their spears lunging forward, piercing those foolish enough to approach. The barbarians fought with savage intensity, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. They could not shatter the Wu line. Just as the barbarians began to regroup, the swordsmen struck from the rear. They burst from their concealment, their blades dancing in the fading light. They descended upon the barbarians with relentless savagery, cutting off their escape, trapping them within the defile. AcCTUALLY roared in fury, his eyes burning with rage. He understood that he had blundered into a trap, that he had underestimated his foe. He fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, his axe cleaving through flesh and bone. But he was unable to stem the rising tide. The pass transformed into an arena of bloodshed, a charnel house of steel and gore. The air vibrated with the death cries of the wounded, the clang of weapons, and the acrid stench of spilled blood. The barbarians struggled valiantly, but they were no match for the disciplined Wu army. Sun Izu observed the unfolding carnage, his face a study in grim determination. He had orchestrated the ambush flawlessly, but he knew that victory always exacted a toll. He saw young lives extinguished, witnessed courageous soldiers fall, saw the horror of warfare etched into their countenances. He realized this was merely the opening act. The barbarians would inevitably return, again and again, until finally quelled. And with each return would come further bloodshed, greater suffering, greater sacrifice. But he was resolute in his commitment to safeguarding his people, defending his territory, securing a lasting peace. And if deception and calculated violence were required to achieve that goal, he would embrace them without reservation. For the sake of Wu, he would embrace any necessary action. As the last of the barbarians crumpled, a silence descended upon the pass. The sole sounds were the groans of the injured and the sighing of the breeze. The battle had concluded. The Wu army had prevailed. Sun Izu walked amidst the devastation, his eyes carefully observing the faces of the deceased. He saw the barbarians, their features contorted in anguish and fear. He also saw his own men, their eyes glazed over, lifeless. He knelt by a slain soldier, barely more than a youth. He left behind a wife and child in the village. Now, he was gone, leaving only memories. Sun Izu gently closed the young man's eyelids, a wave of sorrow washing over him. He knew he would never erase this day from his memory. He knew the cost of peace was staggeringly high. He rose, his gaze drawn to the distant mountains. The sun had plunged below the horizon, and the sky now twinkled with starlight. The night was deep, but the stars shone like diamonds, illuminating the trail ahead. He understood the war had only just begun. But he also felt ready to confront any challenge that awaited him. He was Sun Izu, the general of Wu. He would not waver. He would not yield. He would guide his people to victory, whatever the ultimate price. Victory in the pass. A hawk's cry, a jagged shard of sound, shattered the dawn's hush. Sun Izu's feathered lure dipped, the signal given. An instant later, the mountain pass transformed into a crucible. Instead of wings, a fiery deluge rained down. Burning arrows, unleashed from hidden perches etched into the cliffs, plunged into the densely packed barbarian ranks. Chaos erupted. Targetai's warriors, stretched thin from their grueling march, were caught utterly unprepared. The pass, once a promising avenue, had become a death trap. Horses whinnied in agony, men howled, and the air reeked of charred flesh mingling with the scent of burning pine. Sun Izu watched, his expression unreadable. Victory brought no joy, only the heavy knowledge of his duty. This wasn't an ending, simply a stride on a brutal, winding path. Now, he breathed, his command a mere rustle yet audible to the soldiers poised behind him. Release the tiger. The Wu infantry surged forward, a disciplined tide of steel and sinew. They flooded the pass, their war cries reverberating against the towering stone faces. The initial barbarian ranks, already broken by the arrow storm, crumbled before them. Blades met flesh, spears found their marks, and the ground grew treacherous with blood. Targetai, his face twisted with fury, bellowed at his men, attempting to stem the rout. His massive form, draped in rough furs and reinforced leather, stood out amidst the turmoil. He hewed and cleaved with savage force, felling Wu soldiers with each swing of his heavy axe. Yet even his might was insufficient against the Wu army's relentless discipline. Sun Izu surveyed the unfolding carnage from his high ground. He pinpointed the pockets of resistance, the weaknesses in the barbarian formation, the surges and lulls of combat. He was a conductor, shaping a deadly performance. Minute adjustments, subtle shifts in troop placement, kept the Wu assault at its peak. He noticed Scout Captain Wei, a blur of motion, dispatching two barbarians with a single, elegant motion. Wei's face was stern, his eyes blazing with fierce resolve, a valuable asset, a man who grasped the importance of observation and forethought. The fighting was savage, intimate, and raw. No glory resided here, only the stark truth of survival. Sun Izu witnessed a young Wu soldier, scarcely more than a boy, falter for a heartbeat before burying his sword in the chest of a prone barbarian. The boy's face was ashen, his eyes wide with the shock of what he'd done. Sun Izu knew such memories would remain a lifelong burden. But there was no room for weakness. The battle pressed on. Driven by training and unbreakable resolve, the Wu soldiers steadily gained dominance. The barbarians, their morale shattered by the ambush and overwhelmed by the coordinated attack, began to lose heart. Targetai, realizing the day was lost, roared for a withdrawal. But escape was impossible. The pass was a cage, the Wu army its jailer. Ensnared and desperate, the barbarians fought with the ferocity of trapped wolves. But it was a pointless struggle. As the sun climbed higher, the fighting gradually diminished. The ground was carpeted with the fallen, the air thick with the coppery tang of blood and the stench of death. The Wu army had secured a resounding victory. Sun Izu descended from his vantage point, moving through the aftermath. He saw the wounded receiving care, the dead being gathered. He saw the faces of his men, marked by exhaustion and trauma. He paused before a young soldier, the boy he had seen hesitate. The youth sat on a boulder, his gaze vacant, his hands stained crimson. Sun Tzu knelt beside him. "Are you well?" he inquired, his tone gentle. The boy looked up, his eyes filled with anguish. I took a life," he stammered. "I never imagined." Sun Tzu placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You acted as you must," he reassured him. "You fought for your home, for your kin, for your people." "But it was awful," the boy whispered. "War is always awful," Sun Tzu stated. "That is why we must strive to see its end." He rose and scanned the battlefield. The victory was hard-earned, yet a victory nonetheless. The barbarian horde had been routed, and the threat to Wu averted, for now. But Sun Tzu understood this was not the final page. There would be further battles, additional enemies, more sacrifices. The route to lasting peace was a long and arduous climb, paved with bloodshed. He approached Captain Wei, who oversaw the cleanup. "Wei, assess our casualties. A complete report by nightfall." Wei saluted crisply. "Yes, General." "And the captives?" "Those injured, treat them. The others? Secure them. Their fate will be decided later." Sun Tzu paused, his gaze drifting over the devastation. "Ensure the bodies of the barbarian chieftains, particularly Targatai, are identified without fail. Confirmation of their demise is critical." Wei nodded, grasping the strategic need to confirm the enemy's leadership had been extinguished. "It will be seen to, General." Turning, Sun Tzu walked away, his mind already grappling with the next challenge. The victory in the pass had afforded them a respite, but time was a precious and dwindling resource. He had to use it wisely, preparing for the inevitable return to conflict. Later, as twilight painted the battlefield in somber hues, Sun Tzu stood alone on a small rise overlooking the pass. A lone campfire cast flickering shadows across his face. Scout Captain Wei approached, weariness etched into his features, a roll of parchment clutched in his hand. "General," he announced, his voice subdued. "The casualty reports are finalized." Sun Tzu nodded, his eyes fixed on the distant peaks. "And the prisoners?" "Secure, General." "They are subdued. Targatai's death has broken their spirit." "Good," Sun Tzu replied. "Our losses?" Wei hesitated, then spoke gravely. "Nearly 200 brave soldiers lost their lives, General. Many more are wounded, some critically." Sun Tzu closed his eyes briefly, the weight of those figures pressing down on him. 200 lives, stolen in an instant. Each a son, a brother, a husband, a father. "And the barbarian dead?" he asked, his voice barely a breath. "We estimate over 500, General. Possibly more. The pass is still being cleared." Sun Tzu opened his eyes and turned to Wei. "Tell me of Targatai," he instructed. "What have you learned?" Wei unrolled the parchment and read. "He was a formidable warrior, General. A shrewd commander. He had united disparate tribes beneath his banner. His aim was to raid our lands, to seize our wealth, to claim a permanent foothold in Wu. He failed," Sun Tzu said, his tone devoid of emotion. "Yes, General. He underestimated you." Sun Tzu turned fully towards Wei. "Never underestimate your adversary," he cautioned. "But never overestimate yourself." He paused, then continued, "The victory in the pass is but the opening act. The war rages on." Wei nodded, understanding the significance of Sun Tzu's words. "Your orders, General." Sun Tzu looked out at the gathering darkness. "We will solidify our position," he declared. "We will reinforce the pass. We will prepare for the coming storm." He paused, then added, "And we will continue to seek a path to peace. Even if it demands 1,000 battles." The Duke's gratitude. Dust clung to the messenger's sweat-soaked tunic as he burst into the throne room, his entrance almost a collapse before the assembled court. "Victory," he rasped, throat raw from shouting the news across leagues of hard-ridden miles. "A decisive triumph at Serpent's Pass." Duke Guang, who had been etching anxious paths into the carpet, froze. A ripple of reaction, a hushed wave of sound, washed through the courtiers. General Zhao, a granite statue at the Duke's right hand, betrayed nothing. Tell me everything, the Duke urged, his voice a tightrope stretched between hope and disbelief. Gathering himself, the messenger launched into his account. The ambush, flawlessly executed. Wu archers, raining death upon the invaders. Barbarian ranks dissolving into panic. He painted a vivid picture, the terrain exploited to its fullest, swift, merciless attacks shattering the enemy's resolve. The barbarian chieftain, Targetai, felled, his demise the final, fatal blow. As the tale unfolded, anxiety gave way to radiant joy on the Duke's face. A grin split his features, and he smacked his hands together, a sound like sudden thunder. Magnificent. Truly magnificent. Sun Tzu has vindicated himself. A strategist without peer. A low murmur threaded through the court. Some mirrored the Duke's delight, while others, especially those orbiting General Zhao, exchanged veiled glances. Sun Tzu's unorthodox tactics had been a persistent bone of contention, yet this victory was irrefutable. The Duke swiveled toward Zhao, his smile unwavering. Well, General. Can you still deny Sun Tzu's brilliance? Has he not secured our realm with unmatched skill? Zhao inclined his head, a minimal concession. The victory is clear, Your Grace, he conceded, his tone clipped. The outcome is undeniable. The words lacked genuine warmth, and suspicion clouded his eyes. But the Duke, buoyed by euphoria, missed the undercurrent of dissent. He refocused on the messenger. You bear tidings of great worth. You shall be rewarded handsomely. He signaled an attendant. A chest of silver for this courageous soul. Prostrate with gratitude, the messenger bowed low. My service is to Wu, Your Grace. The Duke's voice resonated with newfound confidence. Now, we prepare a hero's welcome for Sun Tzu. The grand hall shall be readied. A banquet of unparalleled splendor. The news of the triumph surged through the kingdom like a tidal wave, washing away fear and uncertainty, replacing them with hope and renewed resolve. Sun Tzu's name became a mantra on every tongue, a synonym for savior. Days later, Sun Tzu arrived at the capital, leading his battle-worn but victorious army, banners snapping proudly in the wind. Throngs lined the streets, a vibrant tapestry of cheers and tossed flowers. Yet, Sun Tzu remained impassive, his gaze locked forward. The acclamation was welcome, but the spectral faces of the fallen, both Wu and barbarian, haunted his thoughts. Victory, he knew, demanded a steep price, and the adulation offered little solace. As he neared the palace gates, the Duke, surrounded by his retinue, hurried forward, embracing Sun Tzu with genuine warmth. Sun Tzu, my friend. You have delivered Wu. A master strategist, proven beyond doubt. My debt to you is eternal. Sun Tzu bowed respectfully. Your Grace, I have only done what duty demanded, the protection of our land and people. Nonsense, the Duke boomed, clapping Sun Tzu on the back with hearty enthusiasm. You have surpassed all expectations. A novel style of warfare, swift and minimizing losses. Sun Tzu offered no comment. The Duke's assessment lacked nuance. Losses, though diminished, remained a stark reality. And his methods, however effective, often danced on the edge of morality. The Duke ushered Sun Tzu into the grand hall, bedecked in opulent finery for the occasion. A table laden with delicacies threatened to buckle under its burden, and musicians filled the air with celebratory tunes. Nobles and dignitaries packed the hall, all vying to offer their respects to the conquering general. During the feast, the Duke lavished praise and accolades upon Sun Tzu, bestowing a title of nobility, vast estates, and chests overflowing with riches. Mere tokens of my profound gratitude, the Duke declared, raising his goblet high. You have secured our borders and ushered in an era of peace. May your wisdom forever guide us to victory. The assembled guests echoed the toast. Sun Tzu acknowledged the gesture with a subtle nod, but a shadow lingered in his eyes. The wealth and the acclaim held little appeal. His true desire was for lasting peace, not transient glory. Later that evening, after the revelry had subsided and the guests had dispersed, Sun Tzu found himself alone with the Duke in his private study. The Duke entered, a flagon of wine in hand. A moment of quiet contemplation, Sun Tzu. He poured 2 goblets. Indeed, Your Grace, Sun Tzu replied, accepting the drink. The Duke savored a long draught. You have silenced your critics, you know. General Zhao and his cohorts are humbled, their doubts quelled. Sun Tzu sighed softly. The barbs of critics mean little, Your Grace. My sole concern remains the security and welfare of our people. And you have achieved it, Sun Tzu. Achieved it magnificently. But tell me, the Duke lowered his voice, leaning forward. Do you believe this triumph will forge a lasting peace? Will the barbarians truly be deterred? Sun Tzu paused, choosing his words with care. I have dealt them a significant setback, Your Grace. They will be less inclined to encroach upon our lands in the immediate future. However, true peace remains elusive. It requires more than just military might, it demands diplomacy, mutual understanding, and a willingness to find common ground. The Duke gave a slow nod. You possess a wisdom that surpasses my own estimation. But for now, let us savor this victory. Let us bask in the peace you have granted us, however fleeting it may prove to be. The Duke raised his goblet once more. To Sun Tzu, the savior of Wu. Sun Tzu lifted his own goblet, but his heart remained burdened. He knew the conflict was far from concluded, and more battles, more sacrifices, loomed on the horizon. The price of peace, he understood, exceeded all expectation. He drank, the wine leaving a bitter residue. The victory was lauded, rewards distributed, and ducal gratitude manifested in lavish displays. Yet, in the study's quiet, the echoes of the crowd's cheers fading, Sun Tzu felt the true weight of his responsibility, not a mere general, but a sentinel, bearing the knowledge that the pursuit of peace was a ceaseless endeavor. Threat from the east. The jade pendant, a Duke Guang's offering, now felt like a frigid burden, its weight a stark contrast to the warm silk of his robes. Instead of gratitude, a sense of constraint settled in his heart. On the freshly leveled training field, wreathed in morning's pearly embrace, Sun Tzu observed his troops perfecting their maneuvers. The air, still tinged with the acrid memory of serpents' passes pyres, vibrated with the cadence of clashing steel and the stentorian calls of officers. He knew triumph was a fickle phantom. Suddenly, a messenger, dust-caked and breathless, burst onto the field, waving the royal seal like a beacon to bypass startled guards. He collapsed before Sun Tzu, fighting for air. General Sun. Urgent dispatch, from the east. Trembling fingers thrust a scroll forward. Sun Tzu unfurled it. The calligraphy, rushed and blotched with what appeared to be tear stains, detailed a troubling scenario. Qi, renowned for its sprawling plains and peerless cavalry, was massing troops along their shared boundary. Their numbers were significant, to say the least. He scanned the final assessment again, brows knitting together. Significant felt like a gross minimization. The messenger, regaining some composure, clarified. Scouts report at least 50,000, General. Hardened veterans, forged in years of conflict with the northern tribes. And they say. General Han commands them. The messenger's voice dropped to a near whisper. The name resonated with Sun Tzu. Han of Qi. A known aggressor, famed for his ruthless assaults and faith in absolute force. A tactician who deemed strategy needless, preferring the hammer of numerical advantage. Predictable, yet dangerous. He turned to his officers, his voice even despite the unease twisting within him. Continue drills. Intensify the routine. We prepare to host guests. The messenger gaped, confused. But the Duke, General. He needs informing. He will be apprised, Sun Tzu countered, his gaze sweeping the assembled soldiers, when the time is opportune. He needed perspective, a viable framework before the Duke's anxiety swayed his judgment. Rumors gained velocity through the palace. By noon, Duke Guang requested Sun Tzu's presence in the throne room. Fear blanketed the atmosphere, a palpable force that seemed to dull the richness of the tapestries and diminish the bright luster of the bronze fixtures. Duke Guang, usually a paragon of regal grace, fretted before his throne. His face was ashen, his hands clasped tensely behind him. 50,000, he cried, his voice fracturing with suppressed dread. They claim Qi commands the most skilled horseman imaginable. And Han, that butcher. He'll smash our defenses like kindling. Court officials stood like statues, their faces masks of apprehension. General Zhao, standing stiffly to the Duke's right, wore a facade of grim satisfaction. Sun Tzu noticed the subtle clenching of his jaw, a triumphant glint in his eyes. Zhao had always been skeptical of Sun Tzu's approaches, and this calamity seemed to affirm his doubts. General Sun, the Duke implored, his voice quivering, what recourse have we? Even with your training, our legions are dwarfed by Qi's legions. Sun Tzu stepped forward, his voice calm and steady. Your Grace, panic is fruitless. Qi's strength is not in doubt, but brawn alone does not guarantee triumph. But what can we possibly do? The Duke wrung his hands. We are outnumbered. They'll steamroll across our frontiers, plunder our settlements. His words faded, choked by a vision of imminent ruin. We will turn their strength against them, Sun Tzu replied, his gaze unwavering. General Han is known for his directness. He banks on blunt force, disregarding finesse and guile. This is his Achilles' heel. General Zhao scoffed derisively. Guile. Against 50,000 battle-hardened soldiers. We require steel, not parlor tricks. Sun Tzu faced Zhao, his eyes sharpening. Steel by itself is inadequate, General Zhao. A rigid blade can be shattered. We must become like water, adapting to the contours of the land, locating weaknesses in their armor. Enough. Duke Guang snapped, his voice regaining some authority. I summoned you for solutions, not sparring matches. General Sun, I entrusted you with Wu's protection. What strategic plan do you offer? Sun Tzu bowed. Your Grace, I must survey the landscape, decipher their movements. I require swift, reliable scouts to harvest intelligence. And I require your complete trust. The Duke hesitated, his eyes flickering between Sun Tzu and General Zhao. You possess my trust, General Sunday. However, time. Time is a scarcity we do not possess. Then we shall employ every moment optimally, Sun Tzu responded. I shall leave immediately to reconnoiter the border. I will relay my findings within 3 days. As Sun Tzu turned to depart, he caught General Zhao's voice, thick with barely veiled scorn. 3 days. To chase phantoms while Qi sharpens its weapons. This smacks of sheer folly. Sun Tzu paid him no heed. He knew time was scarce. He had to internalize the terrain, pinpoint the chinks in Qi's seemingly impregnable facade, to fashion a strategy that could transmute their overwhelming might into a liability. Moreover, he had to manage Zhao, whose animosity threatened to derail his efforts at every juncture. The contest against Qi would extend beyond the open plains, festering at the very core of Wu. Exiting the palace, Sun Tzu felt the immense weight of duty pressing down. The destiny of Wu, the lives of his soldiers, depended on his judgment. He mounted his steed, the leather protesting beneath him, and urged it forward, towards the approaching threat from the east. The wind carried the premonition of rain, a herald of gathering storms. He rode for hours, accompanied by a small cadre of his most dependable men. As the sun began its descent, casting elongated shadows across the undulating landscape, they drew near the border. Here, the land was a vibrant mosaic of rice paddies, bamboo thickets, and meandering waterways. A land worth defending. He dismounted and walked to the crest of a modest rise, surveying the vastness stretching before him. The border appeared tranquil, deceptively so. But he knew, somewhere beyond the horizon, the army of Qi amassed, a tempest-gathering intensity, poised to crash upon Wu. He devoted the next 2 days to painstaking investigation of the terrain, questioning farmers, scrutinizing maps. He pressed them, seeking every detail, every insight that might offer an edge. He listened to their apprehensions, aspirations, and understanding of the land. He learned of secret paths, treacherous bogs, and long-forgotten shrines. He discovered a narrow defile, barely wide enough for 2 carts side by side, winding through a dense forest. A potential choke point. He located a shallow river, generally fordable, yet riddled with submerged hazards and unforgiving currents. A latent trap. On the 3rd day, as the sun reached its zenith, he returned to the palace. He found Duke Guang in an even greater state of agitation. Reports flooded in, each more alarming than the last. Qi's forces were advancing rapidly, their scouts already feeling out Wu's perimeter defenses. General Zhao stood beside the Duke, wearing a mask of poorly concealed triumph. I cautioned you, Your Grace. Vacillation and artifice will doom us. We must engage them directly, demonstrate Wu's unyielding resolve. Sun Tzu disregarded Zhao's barbs. He walked straight to the Duke and bowed. Your Grace, I have assessed the situation. I have formulated a plan. The Duke looked at him, hope flickering in his eyes. Tell me, General Sunday, tell me how we can weather this storm. Sun Tzu unrolled a map of the frontier, indicating the narrow pass he had identified. We will not confront them in open battle, Your Grace. We will lure them into a snare. He delineated his strategy, his voice steady and assured. He would employ a small contingent of soldiers as bait, drawing the Qi army into the defile. Then, he would unleash a series of ambushes, exploiting the terrain to its fullest. He would harass their flanks, disrupt their supply chains, and sow discord and bewilderment within their ranks. General Zhao scoffed. A handful of soldiers against 50,000. You are sentencing them to certain death. They will be thoroughly prepared, Sun Tzu countered, his voice ringing with steel. They will understand their purpose. And they will possess the element of surprise. He knew his plan was a gamble. It hinged on deception, precise timing, the bravery and discipline of his troops. But he also knew it represented Wu's sole hope. The Duke listened attentively, his initial fear gradually yielding to a nascent optimism. What of General Han? He inquired. He stands as a formidable adversary. Sun Tzu smiled, a cool, calculating expression. General Han is predictable. He believes in the decisive power of overwhelming force. He will walk into our trap. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. This will not be a simple victory. It will demand sacrifice, cunning, and unwavering determination. But if we succeed, we will not only thwart the invasion, but also impart a lesson Qi will not soon forget. He focused his gaze on Duke Guang. Do I have your support, Your Grace? The Duke met his gaze, his eyes a blend of fear and resolve. You do, he affirmed, his voice firm. I entrust the defense of Wu to you, General Sunday. Proceed as you deem necessary. Sun Tzu bowed. Then let us commence. The indirect approach. Your Grace, Sun Tzu opened, his tone a beacon of calm amidst the war room's stifling anxiety. Han believes he's dealing with a wounded animal. Let us not confirm that assessment with premature displays of force. Duke Guang, a spectral figure haunted by sleepless nights, locked eyes with the general. He looked a decade older than his years, the relentless pressure of the looming invasion having carved ravines into his face. So, General, what alternative do you suggest? That we offer him our throats. A ghost of a smile touched Sun Tzu's face. An illusion, Your Grace. We'll present him with a battlefield strewn with apparent weakness, ripe for the taking, which will dissolve beneath his feet like a dream. Royal Advisor Chen nearly choked, his complexion deepening to crimson. An illusion. A vanishing act. This is about survival, not parlor tricks. Qi outnumbers us 3-1. We must stand our ground, man the walls, and make them pay for every inch. Sun Tzu's gaze shifted to Chen, its intensity silencing the advisor's impending outburst. Honored Chen, with respect, you misunderstand the ploy. Direct confrontation feeds right into Han's strategy. He craves a swift, crushing victory, delivering that to him means surrendering Wu on a gilded platter. He indicated the detailed map dominating the table, illustrating the landscape separating the capital from the Qi frontier. Han's power is in sheer volume, an avalanche of manpower. He anticipates fortified cities, a stalwart defense. Instead, we'll deny him that satisfaction. We'll yield territory, strategically, drawing him deeper into Wu, away from his lifelines, into terrain sculpted to our specifications. Concede ground. Chen thundered, the veins in his neck pulsing. Rank lunacy. We'll appear craven. The populace will despair. Popular sentiment is a delicate flame, Advisor Chen, Sun Tzu countered, his voice a steady current. Easily extinguished by defeat, yet capable of being rekindled by triumph. And triumph, in this case, requires not the obstinate defense of every square inch of Wu, but the utter disintegration of Han's war machine. He addressed the Duke again. Your Grace, I advocate a calculated facade of vulnerability. We'll dismantle portions of our defenses, giving the impression of critical weakness. We'll cultivate rumors of flagging morale, of discord within our ranks. Minor skirmishes will be allowed to go against us, nurturing Han's overconfidence, persuading him that triumph is assured. The Duke's brow knitted with concern. It smacks of dishonor. Honor is a luxury ill-afforded in war, Your Grace, Sun Tzu replied, a note of weary resignation in his voice. It is a brutal necessity. Our paramount concern is the preservation of Wu, the establishment of lasting peace. Sentiment has no place in this contest. Sun Tzu elaborated, while we cultivate an exterior of frailty, underneath, we'll orchestrate a symphony of concealed ambushes. We'll exploit the natural defenses of this land, transforming mountains and woodlands into our silent partners. We'll relentlessly strike at Han's supply trains, crippling his logistics, and breeding chaos and paranoia among his soldiers. Paranoia? Duke Guang inquired, intrigued despite his reservations. Precisely, Your Grace. Paranoia can be a war winner. We'll disseminate untruths, plant false colors, manipulate captured Qi soldiers to sow discontent and suspicion within Han's command structure. We'll amplify any existing rivalries, any smoldering grudges. An army at war with itself is already on the precipice of defeat. Sun Izu paused, allowing his words to resonate. The chamber was hushed, save for the spitting torches casting flickering shadows across the map. He knew he was asking the Duke for an act of profound faith, to cast aside conventional wisdom and embrace a strategy on the knife edge of duplicity. And what of General Zhao? The Duke eventually asked, his voice thick with worry. He already challenges your methods. Will he submit to such unconventional dictates? Sun Izu's features hardened. General Zhao will obey. He's a steadfast servant of Wu, bound to the commands of his sovereign. I foresee resistance, however. He will require guidance. Royal Advisor Chen jumped at the opening. Guidance? You mean control? General Zhao is a decorated hero, a respected field marshal. You can't simply guide him as if he were a common recruit. Sun Izu disregarded Chen, his focus unwavering on the Duke. Your Grace, I will manage General Zhao. But I require your absolute and unyielding backing. There will be junctures where my actions will appear unfathomable, even foolhardy. Doubt will be sown, accusations of betrayal will arise. In those moments, you must place your trust in my plan, in my unwavering dedication to securing victory. The Duke scrutinized Sun Izu, his eyes searching, probing. He saw not a bloodthirsty strategist, but a man burdened with responsibility, prepared to make the agonizing choices, to sacrifice personal integrity for the ultimate welfare of Wu. I will trust you, General Sun, the Duke declared, his voice resonant with newfound resolve. I grant you full authority to execute your strategy. But understand this, should you falter, should Wu fall, your name will be eternally condemned as the men who sold out his people. Sun Izu inclined his head. Understood, Your Grace. I will not fail. He returned his attention to the map, his gaze sweeping over the contours of the land, the rivers and forests that would serve as the backdrop for his elaborate ballet of deception. He regarded the Qi army not as an overwhelming force, but as a ponderous beast, susceptible to manipulation, vulnerable to the nuanced art of indirect engagement. General Chen, Sun Izu said, his voice incisive, commanding. Initiate the process of dismantling the outer fortifications of Yong City. Make it appear as though we are abandoning the city, leaving it undefended. Chen sputtered, his face a study in incredulity. But, that's our most formidable stronghold. We can't simply give it up. We are not surrendering it, General Chen, Sun Izu said, his patience fraying. We're fabricating an image. We're laying a snare. Is that clear? Chen, despite his misgivings, knew better than to disobey a direct directive from the Duke's chosen commander. Yes, General Sun, he mumbled, sullen. Good. Ensure also that tales of plummeting morale and rampant desertion are actively circulated throughout the city. Let the Qi spies overhear accounts of our presumed weakness, our lack of staying power. Sun Izu then shifted his focus to the logistical minutiae. He articulated the redeployment of troops, the positioning of concealed supply depots, the construction of camouflaged ambush locations. His instruction was delivered with a precision and clarity that brooked no ambiguity, no latitude for error. As the conference neared its conclusion, Sun Izu addressed the Duke one final time. Your Grace, I am aware that this strategy demands a leap of faith, a readiness to embrace the unorthodox. But I pledge to you, it represents the only route to triumph against such staggering odds. We will not engage Han on his terms. We will draw him into our domain, a realm of deceit, of diversion, of calculated risk. And there, cloaked in shadow, we will shatter his army and establish an enduring peace for Wu. The Duke nodded, his face a canvas of mingled hope and trepidation. He had entrusted the fate of his kingdom to a man who perceived the battlefield not as a site of raw force, but as a chessboard, where the most subtle of moves could dictate the result. He could only pray that Sun Izu's gamble would succeed, that his unconventional methods would prove sufficient to shield Wu from the encroaching darkness. The sun sank below the horizon, casting elongated shadows within the war chamber. The destiny of Wu hung precariously, poised on a razor's edge, awaiting the coming dawn and the inevitable collision of armies. Seeds of discord. The Han war map, a colorful spread of terrain and towns rendered with painstaking accuracy, dominated the war table. Sun Tzu's finger followed the serrated edge of their territory, his gaze lost in the imagined landscape, a phantom trek already undertaken. "Captain Wei," he murmured, his voice a bare breath, "the keenest blade is often the one left in its sheath." Scout Captain Wei, a lean figure whose face bore the roadmap of countless clandestine journeys, responded with practiced swiftness, his keen eyes reflecting the lamp's glow. "General. We will unravel their unity, not with force, but with carefully placed words." Sun Tzu indicated points on the chart: Pingyang, teeming with commerce; Jundu, a vital mountain choke point; the heavily defended Yong'an. "These are the whispers we'll unleash." Wei grasped the strategy instantly. He'd witnessed Sun Tzu weaponize information, terrain quirks, enemy failings, to secure victory. This, however, was a different beast. Not exploitation, but calculated creation of weakness. "And the whispers, General." Sun Tzu turned, a shadow playing across his features. Uncertainty. Frustration. The creeping suspicion of a hollow cause, of venal leaders, of sacrifices squandered. A pregnant pause hung in the air. Seek out those already nursing such sentiments. Stoke their embers. Amplify their discontent. The endeavor was fraught with peril, yet Wei didn't flinch. "Understood, General." That night, shielded by an ink-black sky, Wei led a specialized cadre of scouts and informants across the unmarked boundary. Not warriors, but charlatans, puppeteers of narrative, masters of disguise and persuasive oration. They carried no steel, only subtly nuanced stories, each crafted to inflame existing fissures within Han society. The initial seed took root in Pingyang. A hushed rumor, circulating through the bustling marketplace, alleged that General Han, commander of the invasive force, was amassing personal wealth, hoarding war spoils while his troops starved and his people suffered. The insinuation, subtle as a viper's strike, swiftly gained traction, fueled by the bitterness of merchants already bled dry by Han's exorbitant levies. Another cell targeted the conscripted farmers of Jundu, men ripped from their plows and families to fight an uninspired war. They painted enticing portraits of Wu's abundance, of rich, fertile lands, and equitable rule, hinting at the prudence of defection. They whispered of the futility of resistance, implying that Han was knowingly leading them to slaughter for his own vainglorious ambitions. The boldest gambit was aimed at Yong'an's garrison, a city renowned for its unwavering devotion to the Han dynasty. Here, the operatives worked to corrode the authority of the local governor, weaving tales of his incompetence and cowardice. They fabricated evidence linking him to clandestine deals with Wu merchants, implying a deep betrayal of his own populace for personal enrichment. These insidious rumors spread like wildfire, carried on the breaths of itinerant traders, disgruntled soldiers, and voiceless citizens. Swiftly, the disquieting whispers reached the ears of those in command, planting seeds of mistrust and suspicion. General Han, entrenched outside the conquered city of Shuzhou, initially dismissed the reports as trivial discontent. He was a soldier, a man of action, not a political animal. He placed his faith in the strength of his legions, the rightness of his crusade, and the unshakable fealty of his people. Rebellions he'd crushed before, and he felt confident of crushing more. But the rumors gnawed, growing in volume and intensity. Soon, tangible signs of unraveling followed in their wake. Desertion swelled, supply lines frayed, and acts of sabotage multiplied. One frigid dawn, a cohort of soldiers refused to advance, demanding overdue wages and improved rations. Han, incandescent with rage, decreed a brutal flogging. But the punishment served only to stoke the embers of sedition. The remaining soldiers, witnesses to the inhumane display, turned on their officers, igniting a blood-soaked melee that claimed several lives. Han, forced to deploy his Praetorian Guard to quell the mutiny, found his confidence shaken to its core. He now recognized that the whispers were no mere inconsequential murmurs, but a calculated strategy to undermine his power and destabilize his entire force. He urgently convened his advisors, demanding an explanation for the swelling unrest. Royal Advisor Chen, a sharp and ambitious figure, spied an opening to advance his own agenda. He aimed a subtle accusation at rival generals, insinuating disloyalty and fomenting discord. "General Han," Chen murmured, his voice dripping with veiled meaning, "there are those within your inner circle who harbor envy for your triumphs, who seek to seize your position. They are the true poisoners, corrupting the minds of your soldiers and weakening your command. Han, caught in the snare of his own paranoia, fell victim to Chen's devious plot. He authorized the apprehension and interrogation of many of his most steadfast officers, further fracturing his army and sowing deeper animosity. Meanwhile, back in Wu, Sun Tzu observed the unfolding situation, the reports from his network of spies delivering a grim satisfaction. The seeds of discord had sprouted, and the enemy was now consuming itself from within. The art of war, he mused, lies not solely in prevailing in battle, but in securing victory without ever engaging in open combat. He understood that the campaign against Han was far from conclusion, but he had already established a critical advantage. He had eroded the enemy's will, fractured their solidarity, and planted the seeds of their own undoing. Turning to Captain Wei, who stood in silent attendance, he said, "Prepare for the subsequent phase, Captain. When the timing aligns, we will strike. Not with mindless force, but with deliberate precision and artful deception. We shall exploit the resulting anarchy, and deliver a decisive strike that will usher in lasting peace to our lands." Wei bowed his head in assent. "As you command, General." The price of peace was steep, he knew, and Sun Tzu was prepared to meet it. The general's methods, however unorthodox, frequently proved to be the most effective. He placed his trust in Sun Tzu's discerning judgment, even when beyond his complete comprehension. He had witnessed the general transmute the weak into the powerful, the vulnerable into the untouchable. He had no doubt that he would see it yet again. Incoming reports continued to flood the war room, each depicting a landscape of growing disarray within the Han ranks. Riots erupted in countless cities, supply conduits were severed, and desertion soared uncontrollably. General Han's command was teetering, and his once formidable army was nearing disintegration. Sun Tzu knew that the moment to strike had arrived. He had crippled the enemy from within, and he now stood poised to deliver the final, crushing blow. He summoned his generals, and unfurled his battle plan. A high-risk undertaking, to be sure. But confidence buoyed him. He had meticulously studied the enemy, exposing their inadequacies, and exploiting their vulnerabilities. He had sown the seeds of dissent, and now, the time had come to reap the bitter harvest. Victory without battle. The scrolls unfurled, each confirming Sun Tzu's most audacious hopes. General Han's legion, an iron fist aimed at Wu, was fracturing from within. Wei's seeds of sedition had sprouted into a deadly bloom. Accusations, nurtured by artfully fabricated missives and carefully planted rumors regarding Han's avarice, had reached a crescendo. The soldiers, already demoralized by a protracted march and dwindling provisions, another subtle maneuver by Sun Tzu's network, openly challenged their commander's integrity. Sun Tzu's gaze swept over the battle map, the guttering candle painting elongated, shifting silhouettes across his features as he traced the line depicting the Han army's advance, or, rather, what should have been. It was now a fractured, hesitant scrawl, mirroring the turmoil consuming the enemy's ranks. Intelligence reports detailed skirmishes, desertions, and outright insurrections. Units intended to support one another clashed in bitter conflicts, fueled by suspicion and escalating paranoia. Victory was practically tangible, not the vainglorious, bloody triumph of attrition, but the subtle, ingenious victory of the mind. A victory purchased not with a deluge of lives, but with meticulously crafted falsehoods and judiciously deployed whispers. "General," Captain Feng announced, stepping into the tent, his voice tense with anticipation. "The latest dispatches confirm General Han has forfeited control. His officers are in open defiance. Several contingents have vowed to return to their homes." Sun Tzu offered a slow nod. "Excellent. The fruit hangs ripe for the plucking." He turned to Feng, his eyes reflecting a fierce resolve. "Summon the commanders. We strike at first light." The Wu army, disciplined and steadfast, stood in stark contrast to the disorganized horde it was about to confront. Sun Tzu had trained them relentlessly, instilling not just combat prowess, but unwavering obedience and trust. He had forged them into a honed weapon, ready to strike swiftly and decisively. He revisited the battle plan one last time. It was disarmingly simple, a rapid, concentrated offensive aimed squarely at the enemy's point of collapse. He would leverage the chaos, eschewing a drawn-out engagement. His objective was not wholesale annihilation, but to shatter their morale, sending them scattering in disarray. As the first fingers of dawn painted the horizon in shades of apricot and rose, Sun Tzu stood upon a slight rise, surveying the field of battle. The Han army was a chaotic sprawl, tents haphazardly erected, formations utterly absent. He could observe clusters of soldiers engaged in heated arguments, some even unsheathing their blades. The air crackled with apprehension and mistrust. He raised his hand, a signal pennant snapped in the breeze. A lone drumbeat reverberated across the valley, followed by the deafening roar as the Wu army surged forward. The sheer velocity of the onslaught was staggering. The Wu soldiers, fueled by months of rigorous training and unshakable fealty, advanced like an inexorable tide. They smashed into the unorganized ranks of the Han army, scattering them like chaff in a whirlwind. General Han, caught completely unawares, stumbled from his tent, utterly disheveled. He issued commands, but his voice was swallowed by the cacophony of combat. His officers, embroiled in their own power struggles, proved incapable of rallying their men. With detached composure, Sun Izu watched the Han army disintegrate before him. He witnessed pockets of tenacious resistance, brave soldiers fighting with conviction, but their efforts were futile. The disorder was too pervasive, the disarray too complete. His focus settled upon General Han. The man was a portrait of thwarted fury, his face twisted in rage as he witnessed his army's downfall. A momentary flicker of something approaching compassion touched Sun Izu, but he swiftly suppressed it. Han was a mere instrument, a pawn of ambition and cupidity. He had chosen this path, and now he would bear the consequences. The engagement resembled less a battle and more a rout. The Wu soldiers pressed their advantage, driving the Han army back and inflicting grievous losses. Panic spread like a contagion throughout the enemy's lines. Soldiers discarded their weapons and bolted, desperate to escape the carnage. Within a few short hours, the battlefield was strewn with cast-off arms, abandoned equipment, and the bodies of the fallen. The once formidable Han army was effectively erased. Sun Izu surveyed the scene, his expression inscrutable. The victory was absolute, yet it left a bitter taste. He had safeguarded Wu, but at what sacrifice? He had employed subterfuge, manipulation, and fear to achieve his goal. Was this true peace, or simply a fleeting respite? He saw Captain Wei approaching, his face aglow with triumph. "General," Wei exclaimed, breathless. "The Han army is in full retreat. They're scattering every which way." Sun Izu nodded slowly. "Give chase," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But do not engage in a slaughter. Allow them to return home and disseminate their tales. Let them understand the cost of perfidy." Wei hesitated. "But General, should we not pursue them to the frontier? Ensure they cannot regroup?" "No," Sun Izu responded, shaking his head. "We have accomplished our purpose. We have crushed their resolve. To pursue them further would only prolong the agony and plant the seeds of future animosity. Let them go. Let them learn from their folly." He turned away, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. The sun ascended higher in the heavens, casting long shadows across the landscape. The air hung heavy with the cloying scent of death and the lamentations of the injured. He had secured a victory without a pitched battle, yet the price remained exorbitant. The moral burden of his actions weighed heavily upon him, threatening to suffocate him. He had influenced events, orchestrated turmoil, and deceived his adversaries. Was he a savior, or merely a skillful executioner? He knew these questions would pursue him relentlessly. Yet, he also knew he had acted in what he perceived as necessary to shield Wu. He had selected the lesser of two evils and now must face the repercussions. As he turned from the battlefield, he could not elude the sensation that this victory, however conclusive, marked only the commencement of a far more protracted and challenging struggle. The path to enduring peace was fraught with arduous choices and ethical concessions. And he, Sun Izu, was compelled to walk that path, regardless of its treachery. He knew this was not truly the end. It never would be. The scholars return. The Wu soldiers' cheers dwindled, supplanted by the ox cart's measured groan and the shrill chorus of crickets from the flooded fields. Sun Izu remained still, his gaze pinned to the capital's receding ramparts. He presented Duke Guang with his resignation, a meticulously worded document overflowing with gratitude and assurances for Wu's enduring prosperity. The Duke, initially resistant, eventually ceded, a flicker of disquiet shadowing his evident relief. Guang had perceived the battle's residue, the haunted quality in Sun Tzu's eyes mirroring the barren landscape of victory. The general's heavy armor had given way to a scholar's simple linen, the clash of steel replaced by the whisper of wind through the passing bamboo stands. No longer the strategist, the architect of triumph, he was merely Sun Wu, returning to his roots. Yet, memories clung like the dust stirred by the cart, the defeated Han soldiers' faces, the vulnerabilities he'd exploited in enemy commanders, the eerily disciplined concubine soldiers. Lady May awaited him at their secluded cottage. He noticed her silhouette first, a warm beacon of lamplight spilling across the threshold, her form outlined by the humble wooden door. Approaching, he observed worry lines fanning out from her eyes, deepened with each passing month of his absence. She surged forward, embracing him with fierce desperation, as if fearing his evaporation. "You're back," she breathed, voice thick with emotion. "Truly back." He enveloped her, inhaling the familiar blend of jasmine and sandalwood that permeated her garments, an aroma grounding him, anchoring him in the present moment. "Yes, May. I'm back." The cottage seemed smaller, or perhaps he felt expanded, burdened by hard-won experience. He departed as a scholar seeking wisdom, he returned a warrior grappling with its application. Familiar comforts, the scarred wooden table, the stack of bamboo scrolls, the scent of ink and paper, offered tentative solace. May prepared a simple supper of rice porridge and preserved vegetables. They ate in mutual quiet, punctuated only by the soft crackle emanating from the hearth. He observed her, noting the effortless grace of her movements, the gentle tilt of her head as she listened, even when he remained silent. He wondered if she perceived the darkness nesting within him, the disquiet that nipped at his spirit. Later, settled by the fire, May broke the silence. "Rumors have swept through the capital," she revealed softly, her gaze fixed upon the leaping flames. "Stories of your victories, of your methods." He sighed, raking a hand through his thinning hair. "Rumors often bloom into exaggerated tales," he countered, avoiding her gaze. "But are they untrue?" she persisted, her tone gentle but firm. He couldn't bear to deceive her. "No," he conceded. "They are not untrue." She reached for his hand, her touch a warm reassurance. "I don't require specifics, Wu. I simply need to know that you find peace with what you have done." He met her eyes then, a profound sadness reflected within. "Peace is a luxury I can scarcely afford, May." "Not yet." Sleep evaded him that night. Battleground images replayed across his mind's eye, the faces of those he had outmaneuvered, the calculated gambles he had embraced. He arose before dawn, the nascent light painting the sky in shades of apricot and gold. He sought refuge in his study, the compact space filled with the instruments of his craft, brushes, inkstones, and stacks of untouched bamboo. Lifting his brush, its familiar weight a steadying force, he began to inscribe, not accounts of conflict or strategy, but the underlying principles. He wrote of understanding one's adversary, of self-knowledge, of pursuing triumph through strategic acumen and calculated deceit, yet always emphasizing the paramount objective, enduring peace. As he wrote, realization dawned, his task remained incomplete. He had established peace for Wu, but inner peace continued to elude him. His military philosophy extended beyond mere battlefield success, it encompassed grasping the very essence of conflict, discovering the means to lasting harmony. The ensuing days settled into a routine of composition and instruction. Drawn by his formidable reputation, students began congregating at the cottage, eager to learn from the fabled general. He imparted not only tactics and strategy but also principles of philosophy and ethics. He underscored the imperative of minimizing bloodshed, of prioritizing diplomacy and negotiation whenever feasible. He recounted his campaigns, but he refrained from glorifying the violence or the duplicity. Instead, he illuminated the moral quandaries he had faced, the sacrifices he had endured, the insidious toll that war exacted upon his spirit. He sought to instill understanding that true victory transcended mere enemy subjugation, it resided in subduing one's own inner demons. One afternoon, a youthful scholar named Li inquired, "Master Sun, if deception constitutes such a crucial element in warfare, how does one reconcile its use with principles of honesty and integrity?" Sun Tzu paused, carefully considering the query. "Deception serves as a tool, Li," he finally responded. "Similar to a sword, it can be wielded for noble or ignoble purposes. The critical element lies in its judicious application, accompanied by a lucid comprehension of its ramifications. Deception must never be employed for personal enrichment or the infliction of superfluous suffering. It should be reserved as a last resort, for the protection of the innocent and the attainment of a greater good." He continued, "A commander who leans solely on deceit courts folly. Authentic strength springs from penetrating the truth, mastering the terrain, discerning the adversary, and above all, comprehending oneself. Deception is merely a means to achieve an end, a method of establishing an advantage within challenging circumstances. It must never be misconstrued as the ultimate objective. As his words flowed, he recognized that his tutelage extended beyond his pupils. He was simultaneously instructing himself. He wrestled with the ethical complexities inherent in his actions, striving to harmonize the pragmatism of warfare with the ideals of peace. Lady May observed him from a distance, her heart brimming with a blend of aspiration and concern. She detected the weight he carried, the encumbrance of his past. Yet, she also discerned a spark of luminosity within his eyes, a resolute determination to navigate a path toward redemption. One evening, seated beside the fire, she remarked, "You are undergoing transformation, Wu. I perceive it in your gaze, in your discourse. You are no longer simply a general, but a mentor, a sage." He smiled, a genuine smile that touched his eyes. "Perhaps," he responded. "Perhaps I am finally grasping the true significance of inner tranquility." He understood that the journey ahead would prove arduous and protracted. The specters of war would continue to haunt him, the ethical dilemmas would persist in tormenting him. But he no longer felt alone. Lady May stood resolutely by his side, joined by students eager to absorb his wisdom. Furthermore, he possessed his writing, a means of dissecting the intricacies of human nature, of confronting the challenges of leadership, and of pursuing a path toward enduring peace. He immersed his brush in ink, the ebony fluid swirling within the stone. He had considerable writing to undertake, extensive teachings to impart, and boundless knowledge to acquire. The war might have concluded, but the battle for his very soul had merely commenced. The scholar had returned, yet he was not the same individual who had departed. He was now a warrior scholar, a survivor, a seeker of truth. And he resolved to rediscover the light.